Good evening. Do you believe in ghosts?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! In the name of God!
Here's the duds. Our dreamcatcher. Wish he was here.
A circle of friendship.
To the duds. To Douglas Cabell.
To dads. A web of mystery.
I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church alright?
Why, Judge? I have no reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judge? What we did, Lois, was a secret.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along, helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are going Italian horror mode and talking about a filmmaker we haven't in a little while, I think. So join the sleaze.
Absolutely. We also decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. And Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing since 2018. You do the math. I don't know how many episodes that is. I think we're honestly hitting about 200 bonus episodes, as well as now 60 plus of our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, where we recently did a big boy on Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another.
Yeah,
got a lot of you very heavily requested, and we've had a lot of pretty incredible feedback on, so thanks to all of you folks, and thanks to everyone who's enjoying all those bonus episodes. We did actually have a lot of people sign up here, so we will give them their shout outs now. We had Eric Zielinski, James Cameron, the James Cameron, I really hope that is your real name, Kate, Terry, Aiden Andruchow signed up at the $10 tier actually, and is going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings. We had Lexi Donovan sign up, Siobhan Lake, David Jones, Duve, Baram, Sandy Palacios, Alec Nelson, John Wyman, actually my cousin-in-law, John Wyman, director. Yeah. Welcome, John. He awesome. It was the One Battle After Another, man. He was like, I needed to hear it. Naomi signed up, Raphael Ambrosis Costeau, Martin Bernabe, Eric Stafford, Amir Shani, Vincent D'Angelo, David Solorzano, Drew Fila, Jeremy, Zach Tilma, Ethan Johnson, Charlie Taylor, Jacob Brockway, and last but not least, a good boy, which I really hope is a dog,
an actual dog. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. But yeah, thanks so much to all of you folks for signing up over on the Patreon. Hope you guys are appreciating all those bonus episodes, and we appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you were listening on either one of those platforms, I can see the stats. I can see you right now listening on both those platforms. Give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. Once again, we are out here hawking the brand new Sleazoids Pod dad cap, as well as the blowout-themed shirt by friend of the pod, Brandon Lim of Black Belt Cinema, who did the incredible design for it that includes many of our favorite 80s movies on it. If you are interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. Although I do have to regretfully mention, I do believe we still are not shipping to the United States right now. Hopefully that will clear up soon. The tariff situation is kind of crazy, but if you are in the States and you're like, hey, why can't I place this order? That's the only reason. That button will hopefully in the future be turned back on for our American listeners. But if you're anywhere else in the world, as far as I know, you are still shippable at the moment. So go check it out. Yeah, that is the last plug. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the Made Fiend would have heard from us, where Jamie and I would have done our annual Toronto International Film Festival special, where we go absolutely sicko mode together. I believe the number ended up being 46 movies between the two of us. And we talked about 46 movies in 4.5 hours.
Yeah, we tried our best. It was like, we tried to keep that 5-minute limit. Who knows if we pulled it off, but
I actually, doing the time coding, which I did do for that episode upon request, we actually held fairly firm to that. We did pretty good.
Good.
There were
so many movies.
There were a couple movies where we got closer to like 8 or 9 minutes, but it was the ones that you could tell it was the ones we really liked. It was like the Secret Agent by Kleber Mendoza Filo, or it was like the Jafar Panahi film. It was Just an Accident, the Park Chan-wook film that we saw. No Other Choice. Like, there were a couple specific movies. We had a couple more deeper thoughts we wanted to get into, but beyond that, it's about 5 minutes a film. And yeah, we also talked about some of the big new stuff that's going to be coming out soon, like the new Knives Out film and the new Del Toro Frankenstein. So if you're interested in any of those films, go back 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. But then last week over on the Patreon, we wrapped up our film festival new release movie watching with a patron voted episode that you guys voted for us to. You nominated this double feature, you upvoted it to be the one that we would talk about, and you sent us back to Akira Kurosawa's bleak 60s sort of moral melodramas and / corporate conspiracy thrillers set in post-World War II Japan, starring, obviously, Toshiro Mifune. We talked about The Bad Sleep Well from 1960, as well as High and Low from 1963. So we talked about him doing sort of a noirish take on Hamlet, as well as doing, obviously, just one of the all-time great kidnapping thrillers meets chamber dramas meets police procedurals. It is maybe the best example of all three of those genres in a lot of ways. Yeah, absolutely. I gotta thank you guys for actually voting that one in so I could finally get around to watching High and Low. That was kind of insane that I hadn't watched it yet. One of the best procedurals I've ever seen. And it was really cool too to see The Bad Sleep Well, because I feel like that'd be one I wouldn't normally just throw on. And it was just, it's so just rich with character, and he's got such a level of control. As far as Akira Kurosawa adapting Shakespeare, not as well known as, the big ones. Yeah, so totally. Worth checking out, especially if you like High and Low, because so much of its style felt like a bit of a test run. Yeah, it almost does feel kind of like he's almost remaking it in a way, and just in a different kind of narrative. It's really interesting to watch both of them consecutively. Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode, once again, patreon.com/SLEAZOIDS podcast. That was last week's bonus episode that you guys voted on, and you guys are actually doing another round of voting right now over on the Patreon, where you are picking one of the episodes we are going to be talking about in Noirvember. So if you want to have your voice heard on what noir themed double feature we do next month, that's where you're going to want to be, over there. Yeah. But moving on to this week, however, we are once again joined by a very special guest who we realized we hadn't had on in a number of years, and it was a bit of a travesty because he did an episode very early on in the show that we greatly enjoyed, and somehow he just kind of slipped through the cracks, but we're glad to have him back. He is a fiction writer and film critic. He's the author of many fantastic horror and sort of genre books, and he's also a instructor and in the Department of English at the University of New Brunswick, and he also does his own writing themed podcast called Craftwork, and that guest is Mike Thorn. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you guys again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, so stoked to have you back. The genesis of this episode is incredibly funny because I don't know why we had just not thought to circle back and have you pick another double feature, but we actually posted about an episode that we were doing, and I believe it was our Stephen King episode that we were looking to do on The Mangler and The Dark Half, and it was one that we had happened to just already record. We were just promoting that it was coming next week, and Mike said, I would love to be on that episode. episode. And we were like, Mike, we would have loved to have you on that episode. That's really disappointing. Like, sorry, we already recorded it, unfortunately. But that was what kind of generated us being like, Mike, we do need to get you back on. We should do something Stephen King related, because I think you have a lot of Stephen King thoughts. I feel like he's a pretty important guy to you. So what two non-Dark Half and Mangler King adaptations did you bring with you this week? And what was the thinking behind pairing the two together?
Yeah, so I went with the two films based on the two first King books I ever read. So I read the novels that these are based on when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And they are kind of an odd pairing aside from that. Pet Sematary and Dreamcatcher are the two. So those books have the permanent...
But it's personal. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that touch.
We always love that. Because I mean, honestly, Pet Sematary was one that I caught on cable. I didn't read the book, but I watched the movie on cable when I was like, I don't know, too young. I remember that, and I remember like certain scenes, which we'll get to, of course, really freaked me out. And then kind of have been in my mind since then. So yeah, it's kind of something for me like that too.
Yeah, well, I kind of like the idea of tackling one that kind of came out, when Stephen King was, at the point where he was getting a lot more sort of control over what his adaptations look like. He famously didn't have a lot of that in the late 70s and the early 80s. He is not a fan of some of the changes some of the people did to his work. Pet Sematary is a great one to talk about simply because he wrote the screenplay for that. He had a lot of power over how that translated to the screen, what was cut down in order to make that pretty bigger book than it ended up being a movie onto the screen. And then Dreamcatcher, I gotta say, I've never seen this one, or I hadn't ever seen this one. This is pure undiluted Stephen King
wild, yeah.
in a way that I did not realize was possible, and that I was a little shell-shocked by. So I'm this feels like the Vulgaroturus Stephen King pick, and I'm very excited to get into the fact that we have one that's a little bit more broadly loved, a little bit more, at least I wouldn't say Pet Sematary is as highly rated as some of the, it's definitely not up there with Carrie or The Shining for a lot of people, but for a lot of people who just watch Stephen King movies on TV, it's one of his most popular adaptations, and Dreamcatcher does not have that same reputation. So I'm definitely very excited to get into it.
I just the amount of places that Dreamcatcher goes while still holding on to like all of the Kingisms, I think is pretty wild to watch. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, and maybe even expanding on whether or not, like, I'm almost wrestling with it of how I view it of like pure entertainment versus what is intentionally done in the film and everything. So anyway, we'll get to it, but yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is going to be a fun pairing to jump into. So let's do it. Let's kick things off here with Pet Sematary.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting them up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror, Pet Sematary.
All right, we are talking Pet Sematary, the 1989 horror film directed by Mary Lambert, written by Stephen King, who was adapting his own 1983 novel for the big screen, and starring Dale Midkiff and Denise Crosby as Lewis and Rachel Creed, a Chicago couple moving to rural Maine with their two children, Ellie and Gage, and their cat Church, and soon discover the backyard of their new home is also a supernatural pet cemetery that reanimates and zombifies what's buried there, animal or human. The film also quite famously has Herman Munster himself, Fred Gwynn, as the friendly sort of hick neighbor Judd, which has become one of the more sort of iconic and parodied Stephen King screen characters. This is our first time, I believe, talking about music video television and film director Mary Lambert, who rose to prominence in the 80s off of her videos for Chris Isaak and Janet Jackson and Eurythmics and Madonna. I mean, I guess most famously, she did the videos for Borderline, Material Girl, Like a Virgin, and Like Prayer. So pretty visually striking videos at a time when studios were looking at commercials and videos as solid reels to launch directorial careers, especially for material that studios were already sitting on and just kind of needed someone to visually make it kind of pop. And the I guess that was the genesis of this. The 1988 writer's strike happened, and they had a sort of finished script sitting around that Stephen King had done for his novel Pet Sematary. I believe originally written for George Romero, who he was good friends with, and who obviously had done Creepshow for him. And obviously we've talked about how King appears in what's the medieval jousting on motorcycles movie?
Night Riders.
Night Riders, fantastic fucking movie.
Great movie. Great movie.
King has a great cameo in that film. So originally, this is his, his first screenplay credit that he got was for Creepshow after his string of hits in the 70s, obviously, that all ended up getting adapted. You talk about Carrie and Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Stand, all this stuff. And I guess they offered it to Lambert, who basically said that she had really loved the book and she loved King, and she promised to adhere to be pretty faithfully to his book, or at least faithful to his screenplay that he was doing himself. And she kind of made some concessions to King and, deferred to King. And I think that's going to be maybe the most fun thing that unites these two movies. It's the adaptations that are extremely faithful to King in the ways that maybe other people aren't.
And I think both films will show kind of where it works for the most part and where in some moments it doesn't, or it comes off more campy than what I think the tone is trying to intend. But I do like that he was sitting with Lambert, and just as soon as she was mentioning kind of the, wanting it to be as completely faithful as possible, he was instantly like, this is the director I want. Because I remember him, I think he said it in The Shining when that came out. I think he's changed his mind on it, but he said when it came out that he didn't like that adaptation, and it's probably created some type of thing where he's like, whenever I do have the power to kind of choose the director, I'm going to do someone that already loves my stuff to a point where they won't change anything. I just think that's a very interesting, I don't know, it's really interesting when they're so directly connected to the adaptation of their own work. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. I do think that this one is a good version of that. Even though the ending, we'll get to it, but the ending was kind of studio. It was messed with a little bit by the studio.
Yeah, Paramount knew what made a horror movie in the 80s pop for some people, and they had their own ideas about it. But Mike, were you familiar with Lambert before you saw the movie, or is this your sort of main thing you know her from?
No, I mean, like Jamie, I saw it on cable when I was probably 12, like right around the same time I read the novel. It was on, I don't know if you guys got this as well. There was a channel called the Space Channel. It was like a sci-fi fantasy channel, and they had...
Of course.
Loved Space Friday Channel. Night Frightmare. Did you guys get to the Friday?
I did watch that,
I think that's probably where I watched it, because I would sneak into my basement, or when I was at my grandmother's house, there was a room that they didn't usually go in, and there was a TV, and I would constantly try to get onto that. If it was Friday night, I would just watch them, and that's actually how I watched Ginger Snaps as well. But anyway.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so same thing. Yeah, it was like I had to sneak down and saw several movies that just permanently fucked me up and probably made me the person I am today, and in some mess up way. Like The Exorcist, I think I saw for the first time as a Friday Night Frightmare as well.
Awesome. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
There is something about
none of us are familiar, I guess, with I was going to say hopefully one of us maybe could be able to speak to Urban Legends Bloody Mary or Pet Sematary 2. Oh, okay. Or Jamie, I was like, for you, man, she did Halloween Town 2 Calabar's Revenge. I feel like that's something you had to have watched in your youth.
I did. I had when I was doing my logging project of Letterboxd, I did have to rewatch Halloween Town 2. So she's good at some Halloween vibes. I don't particularly like that movie. I think think she does a much better job at the Halloween spooky vibes in this one. But
yeah, I mean, this movie being a huge hit for her is what I think put her into the corner of being like, we're going to bring you into the Halloween vibe franchise sequel, direct to video. We're going to do some TV movies. I mean, I guess now she does some paycheck episodes of like network TV, like The Blacklist, and she does Hallmark. She does the Netflix version, of Hallmark Christmas movies.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Which is what she's doing right now.
I mean, what I like about, I don't know if it's necessarily her style or if this is just kind of what they tried to capture, but even when they show like the graveyard in the very beginning, the intro, it has that kind of spooky Halloween campy vibe, even though I think there's enough production value and detail that it still looks like there's like it's a believable world that you're in. But it just still looks kind of haunted housey, and not in a bad way. I don't mean that as a, it's a pure compliment. I think this.
I also think the twinkling, creepy choir score that almost sounds like a Danny Elfman ripoff by Elliot Goldenthal is definitely sort of contributing to that vibe.
Sure.
This is one of his earliest movies, if not his first movie, before going on to do like Drugstore Cowboy and Alien 3 Heat. Literally actually replacing Danny Elfman when he and Tim Burton left the 90s Batman movies to move on to Joel Schumacher. So like kind of an interesting sort of connection there. But yeah, no, the opening is great. The slow dolly along the pet cemetery, all the voiceover too of the kids giving their like funeral rites to the Perrys that are buried. Like Spot was a good boy,
that's something too that I found pops up throughout this. Like eventually we get to a ghost character and they have like these kind of dream moments that are kind of between dream and reality, but a lot of the sound effects and the sound design they use is great. There's always these like reverb and echo voices, and with the filmmaking, there's these like really natural fades and stuff. But yeah, I really like the sound design in this. And I won't say it yet, but there's one particular sound design that they do after a certain death that I just think is like, oh, it's just creepy. So
oh yeah. I mean, another thing I love about this film is I think one of the caveats that King had when Lambert was hired was he insisted that it be shot in Maine. And I really do think it makes a difference. Like the Maine atmosphere is so strong in this film.
The location work is really, really nice. And I mean, she has an eye, obviously. So, I think some people, retroactively kind of look at the film and they see some of the kind of broad daytime way that some of it is shot as kind of a bit of that kind of campy, picture perfect Americana thing. But I mean, if you've read enough King, you know that King has that aspect of him. So I think that that's actually kind of faithful to, shoot just like the way that how green the grass is and how blue the sky is when the kids are playing on the lawn. And like these are specific moments that King tonally does swerve between moments like that and then being like, I am going to show you something unpleasant and very bleakly morbid inside this kind of setting. And I do think, you could maybe argue that some of that is a little exaggerated even further because it is King on, in his cocaine era in the cheesy 1980s when Paramount knew what kind of sold for a horror movie crowd. So maybe you could say how heightened and exaggerated going from so cutesy to so unpleasant is something maybe unique for the 80s. But for me, that is something that doesn't hinder the film at all. I think that absolutely works for the film, even though I haven't read this particular book. I've read enough King that I've kind of seen those tonal shifts. But for you, Mike, when did you read the book first or watch the movie first?
It's a good question. It's so long ago that I can't remember. Like they kind of bled together. It was very close succession. But I mean, one of the biggest changes from the novel is there is this supernatural element of a Wendigo. And I just think I guess they tried to incorporate that into the 2019 version, which I think is not very good.
Yeah, I didn't like that one.
No. I agree with what you're saying, Josh. I think there's a way that the film is playing with like a kind of Norman Rockwell melodrama aesthetic in the beginning. And I mean, that's part of what's so disturbing about some of his work is he takes this Norman Rockwell thing and then just shows the kind of rot underneath that, Yeah.
And I find with this film too, there's a lot more drama than I think you would expect. I think it's all good. So it isn't one of those films, I think, where you're eventually like a slasher, for instance, where you're almost waiting for the killer, whatever. I think all of the family drama stuff they build into it, so when all of the deaths eventually do happen, they really make an impact. And all the foreshadowing that Lambert does is pretty awesome, like going from the graveyard and having the reverb voices and everything, and then they do a hard cut to the semi truck in the highway just zooming by, and at first it's just kind of startling, but if you've seen the movie, you know that this is going to pop up over and over again
on repeat visits. It definitely feels like almost like a cartoonish cruelty how many times they hit you with that truck, like nearly like feeling like you're gonna get hit with it.
Because even like 5-10 minutes later, when he's re-meeting the neighbor because of the cat, right after he crosses the street, another truck just zooms by, and it's almost frightening how fast these things are going. They're really trying to emphasize the power and speed and just how big these things are. So and again, knowing what is going to happen just makes you like, oh my God, like it makes you kind of your skin crawl a little bit. And it also, like you said, there's a little bit of a prod. It feels like the second, third, fourth time you're watching the movie. So.
Yeah, well, I think that this movie just benefits a lot from the fact that, I mean, King has always been really gifted at coming up with these fun, high concept horror scenarios and kind of ideas. I mean, we've talked about him so much about, like, sometimes it is as simple as like, what if an abused teen girl had telekinesis and got revenge? Or what if a writer was trapped in a fucking haunted hotel or went back to his hometown and there's vampires there now? And, what if an old car started killing teens? Like, it's just, he's very good at coming up with just like that very simple premise that came from somewhere in the back of his mind, and then kind of figuring out how to incorporate it into his dramatic interest, which obviously really shifted over time. And, like a lot of them recurred, obviously, his interest in sort of small town Americana and coming of age stories and semi-autobiographical stories of husbands and authors going mad and, lots of different things that kind of came up. But this is, in my opinion, one of the best premises that he ever came up with in terms of the idea of, coming from the fact of a sort of real experience that he had where he was a resident at the University of Maine, and his cat did get run over by a car or by a truck, and it was near his new house. And he just said he had such an unpleasant and uncomfortable experience explaining that to his daughter, and he never had considered the fact that you have to explain like what death is to a child. And even before maybe you haven't really fully reckoned with what that is yet. And so it's such a great dramatic hook to be like, what if there was this road that is like almost feels supernaturally menacing, particularly towards pets. It runs over a cat, and there's a cemetery nearby to try to sort of reanimate it and bring it back. But regardless, it's not the same as it was when you put it there, because death is a permanent thing. Even if there is a way to sort of temporarily try to make sense of it, it is never going to quite be the same. And that's such a difficult thing to explain to a child. And I think that is also something that makes it part of the corniness of the drama factor, is that you are making something that is designed to upset a child. I definitely feel like the cute cat on the poster was something that made me go, I should watch that. As a kid, and I watch it now, and I'm there are moments of this that are legitimately against my better instincts, like kind of harrowing. Even if there's certainly flaws to be seen in the film. I think one of the main ones for me is I think that Lambert, coming from the music video realm, maybe didn't have as much control over actors as some of the other people who made King adaptations. But outside of that, like, I still find this movie really works, and I think part of it is just that premise is so good.
It's heavy.
Absolutely. And I think like him, like there's a scene where he does eventually have to tell his daughter about what's the church, the cat. He dies, and he has to tell her what happened, and she's asking all these questions about the afterlife, and he actually fakes his faith kind of to make her feel better, which I found really interesting. Like, it feels as if he's not really believing in what he's telling her, but it's just for the pure comfort of it all. And then as the movie goes, the daughter further tries to like ask him questions about it. And
because kids aren't stupid,
right? Because it's like, well, he's like, well, if this is what you've told me, that this is how the world works, then I have to inquire about this. And so she just does. And he never has these kind of straightforward answers. He's always kind of just like juggling around in his brain, trying to come up with something to make her feel good, but also try to be as honest as possible in some capacity, because he still cares about her and wants her to understand the world. It's a very difficult thing, I can imagine, as King said, to balance. And she even says things like, you know, if the cat is dying and needs to go back to God, it's like, why doesn't God have his own cat? Like, I want my cat. So it's like putting it in this kind of child perspective that I really, you know, it's like adorably sad. You know, you're just like, oh, you just don't quite get it. And to be fair, it's like he's not telling her the truth either. I think kids can probably be more resilient to the truth than you realize in some capacity. But I do understand that kind of feeling to just try to mask the world from your child. It makes sense. But yeah, I love watching him juggle with that. I think and also a great performance by Dale Midkiff, I think, as Lewis.
Oh, see, that's one of the things that I don't dislike him. I actually, weirdly enough, I have a weird relationship with it, because every time I watch the movie, I always go, that line landed a little bit awkwardly, and maybe he's not like the greatest actor, or, you know, I find he's a perfectly good looking guy. He's a perfectly, you know, he looks like a guy who is he's supposed to be the new resident doctor at the college in this, right? In this, right? Yeah. There's something a little stiff about him that never works for me in the early goings, when it's the really nice scenes between he and Rachel Denise Crosby. I don't know if maybe it was also just a certain chemistry between the two or something. There's something about those scenes that never quite work for me, but I actually find his performance for me gets better as the movie goes on, and the movie shifts around him, because he needs to be a little bit more of like stiff, disbelieving, slowly going crazy, and I feel like his style of acting actually works better for where the character ends up versus where he starts. Yeah,
I could see that. I personally kind of see it as, I do agree that he's probably way more reserved and stiff than you would normally see from like those beginnings of the melodramatic family, and they're all super in love and they're in this new idyllic countryside and all that stuff. But I do think that anytime he's separated from his family, even in those beginning parts, like when he's talking to Judd or anything, and he's being shown the cemetery, or they're talking about the history of the town or whatever, he does have a very like kind of dark presence to him that I feel is almost always lingering. I'm not exactly sure why, because they don't give much of a background to him, but, and it could straight up just be what you're saying, where he's just kind of got a stiffness to his performance. But for some reason, it's always worked for me because of the constant, like, he almost feels like he's different with his family, and then when he's separated from it, there's like this, he almost seems more miserable, I guess, than what he's putting on in front of the kids and his wife. But again, I don't know how much of that is built into his choices.
I see that too.
The film itself. But yeah, that's just how I've read it.
Yeah, no.
Well, part of it might be having a job where you see death and mortality every single day, which is something they kind of highlight kind of early on, and where he has to be. There's something to maintain when it comes to the home. There's something beautiful about it. You know, the cat is obviously, Church is obviously adorable. Obviously, you have the two child performances in Ellie and Gage. One of which is one of the most adorable child performances maybe ever given in a film. In terms of how cartoonishly I love you, Daddy.
Oh yeah, they just milk every single thing. It was kind of funny. I was watching this with my friend Maddie, who's never seen it, and at the beginning, it's doing all the foreshadowing for the truck. And and the cat kept popping up, and she just kept going, if they kill this cat, I swear to God, I'm going to be so upset. And I'm just thinking like, oh, just wait to see who they kill.
They're going to fucking kill that kid.
Oh my, as soon as he said that, I kind of got like this sunken feeling of like, you're going to hate me in an hour. Oh my God. But yeah, it does really work with, I find, like, because I don't remember that feeling of not knowing what's going to happen because I was like 12 or whatever when I watched this, but I there when we get to that scene, everyone that was watching it was kind of like, are they actually going to do this? Because they've just set up so much and they thought it was directly towards the cat, and that kind of they thought it was mostly just going to be a movie about a dad trying to explain death to the child and then having it come back to bite him in the ass because church comes back and it's this like fucking evil hissing cat that just wants to kill him the whole time. But yeah, does it ever evolve?
Well, I was gonna say that's what makes this special to me. Is like I think that's the easier version of the movie. Is that you bury the cat comes back, the cat's a monster, it becomes a creature feature. Right. That's the easy version of this movie. The harder version is the dad and the level of despair that he goes through when they take the premise further and when they do decide that we're going to take the kid too, and you already know it doesn't work, but you're going to do it anyway because because the opposite is so much worse. The idea of living with the pain and living with the knowledge of death, like that when this movie lurches, I want to say in its final third, really into a more like just sad melodrama of like people not being able to cope. Like that's where the movie for me gets a little bit stronger, because otherwise, you're looking at a fun pulpy movie of a cat coming back and attacking people, and there's moments of it that's fun. Yeah, totally. But
it's like that's where I think I always forget how long it takes for that to happen too. Like it takes a good hour, right? Something like that. And just to take that time to get to know the kids, to get to know the family, to get to know the grief of just losing the cat itself, and knowing, like, having that desperation to resurrect it. I think just it makes you believe in this decision that you would probably in a different context think is completely stupid, because you're just like, what's going to happen. But there's just such a despair that I totally buy into it when it gets there. And it really helps to have, before this all happens, but to have Judd be kind of the introduction of it all. I love that he's like I love the accent. I mean, it's been parodied like crazy. I think South Park even did a couple episodes with that character or something like that. But just he's got this like, he has kind of a spooky presence in a sense that he's like good at telling the ghost story, but he also has a very comforting presence at the same time. And I think it's a cool balance for his character, where he's like, he is really just introducing him to death and resurrection, but
he's the performance of the movie for me. He's the guy. He's so what he does with his eyes and the way that he looks at this family, and you can tell that he already kind of knows that, like, he's the one who tells them to go and bury the cat and what it would do, even though he already knows what it's going to do because he's been there before. He's in the way that he's just designed to be the weary neighbor across the street who's seen this for decades and been like, look at all of this death that I've seen, but here's another person I want to help them get through it, even if he does it in his creepy drawl kind of way, where he does go, that's one mean road, all right, over there. Love it. God damn. I'll take you up there sometime and tell you the story.
And I just also the way that Lambert like focuses on his face in that moment, where it's kind of framed normally like you're meeting the neighbor. He's very nice and sweet and whatever, and then as soon as they mention like that road and whatever, she does this big close-up where the camera's kind of under him too, so he looks kind of like overlooming as he's telling it. And yeah, you're right, like the beating eyes and the voice is just it's fantastic. I love it so much. I could listen to him like read any haunted story I wish he came out with a book back in the day, or an audio book.
Another thing I was going to mention, since you guys brought up Italian horror earlier, when I rewatched the film this time, I thought this is like the most Fulci American movie of the 1980s. Like the grotesquerie and the kind of like disgusting level of detail that it's giving to the violence. Mm-hmm. It's kind of Fulci-esque. Like it reminds me a little bit of The House by the Cemetery, or
I can see that.
Yeah, there's something Fulci.
It's funny. I forget who else did a big 1980s Fulci comparison. I think it was Will Sloan was the one who said that Nightmare on Elm Street for him has always had like a sort of Fulci-esque quality to it, but in the sort of tangibility of it. But yeah, I mean, Fulci's the god, and eventually
when they do get to like the very detailed and close-up violence with like, well, you know, with the scalpel, for instance, and the heel and things like that. Like those are very visceral, and honestly a little bit unexpected, just given everything else, because the movie has its violent moments for sure, but a lot of it, like we've said, is more, it's kind of the that chilling vibe of it all. Like it just feels creepy and spooky, and like there's this doom that's coming to them kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and the morbidity, I think, of just, you know, the fact that they live right next to this big cemetery like that. Like when Judd eventually does take the parents over there, she's like, killed a lot of pets. Made a lot of kids unhappy, you know, and he's showing it to them, and he's explaining it that it is literally this tangible symbol of like broken-hearted children learning about death. And he's trying to say, you know, it's not meant to be a scary place. They are supposed to rest here, knowing that just beyond is obviously the sort of mountainside where you can actually go into the sort of burial ground where the revival can actually take place. But, you know, it's, you know, he's trying to, you know, show them that, I think maybe warn them a little bit that you maybe don't want this happening to your cat, but at the same time, he is trying to, I think, welcome the idea of into the child's sort of repertoire, that this is something that could happen. Your cat is not going to live forever, which is something that the mom like makes the dad promise that they're going to go take him to get fixed, and he literally is made to promise that church will be fine. And that little moment when the dad has to come up and be like, in that 1% chance that the cat doesn't make it, like, you have to fucking explain this. Like, it's two parents who don't want to explain death to their child, and the old guy next door was like, I wish I had it explained to me before it happened to my dog.
Right.
Spot. So, you know, he's trying to prepare them for it. And you contrast that with some of the uglier moments, like when that cut to that graphic accident wound at the college hospital, right? And that's sort of the big moment where the sort of supernatural component enters, because the Lewis is there to take care of this guy, and the guy is just clearly dying on the spot, and he's giving this monologue in this way. He's like, the soil of a man's heart is stony, which is obviously something that Judd is going to sort of repeat back to him later, and he's going to haunt the rest of the movie as this almost like sort of Sixth Sense style ghost that basically looks like he kind of woke up from his accident and he's in the same room as you, and he's the one who's kind of warning you, hey, I've kind of seen the other side and what wants to maybe cross over from the other side, so do not, you know, disobey the natural rules of living and death.
And this is also when they start to, and it feels like this is another kind of Kingism too. Two things. One, dreams being kind of like a transmission of information or knowledge or whatever, wisdom, or even something that's currently happening at the same time, which he does through the daughter, where she constantly has dreams that is like, you know, I saw that church died, or I saw that Gage and Daddy died, or whatever. And it always translates to exactly what's going on in the film. And that's something I've realized that King has. He's got this, like, it kind of has that same thing with Firestarter in a way, where it has this, like, the child being completely innocent, or maybe not Firestarter, but the child being completely innocent has them almost being able to have a tether to, like, the supernatural world or something like that.
There's a purity that puts them on another wavelength, is something that is very consistent in King.
Yeah, and with this, like, what they do with the dad is, and this ghost jogger is the start of kind of going back and forth between the dream world, which almost seems to represent death itself, and the real world, and how it's completely connected and even physical. Because when he goes out with the ghost and goes to the cemetery and everything when he's warned not to, and then he comes back, he wakes up and thinks it was a dream, but then he looks and the sheets are dirty. So clearly there was, like, an actual physical movement and everything like that. So I do like that it starts to kind of melt together throughout the film.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is like this. I think you're describing a lot of these features really well. It's like the whole film is this collision between the dream and the nightmare. Mm-hmm. It's a very American Gothic setup, too, because there is this sort of mirage of the American dream that they're living out. But as Josh is pointing out, there's, like, this constant proximity of death, like, circling around them. Like, it's this kind of this is like, this whole film is just like soaked in a knowledge of mortality in a really serious way that I think this comes from the novel, but it sort of comes through in the film as well. Like, the way it's thinking about death is kind of unusually serious and weighty for a genre movie. And maybe that's just me, but that's the way I've always felt about it.
No, I think you're spot on. I do think that the film does a good job of being like, you know, there is something about the unnatural sort of perversion of a doctor who sees death every day and yet cannot accept it when it like comes out of the workplace and goes into the home, because it feels like that's a perverse place for it to be happening in. And it feels like a really solid emotional base for a probably much more serious movie than this one ends up kind of being, which is I think the whiplash that some people experience with the film is that you feel like you're putting on like, you know, a late 80s campy horror Paramount film that they kind of tried to package this as, is that, you know, you could see what they wanted. You could see that they said, you know, Stephen King's name, it sells. We have a music video director. We're going to get the Ramones to do a fucking banger theme song. So good. You know, you could see this coming out in between Paramount putting out like Friday the 13th sequels and what it was that they wanted the movie to be. And I think on some level, the movie did satisfy those people. But yeah, I think you're spot on that there is something clearly, you know, much deeper and darker within the film that does feel like fundamentally everything else is built out from. And that's something that gives me huge tonal whiplash when I watch this film, in the same way that it does when I read King's stories, which makes it feel very faithful to him. But it is one of those things where every once in a while I'm just like, man, this really is going to a place that's kind of gut punching me a little bit. But the movie is a music video director in the 80s trying to be a little silly at times.
Yeah. I think that is why, like, when the death scenes do occur, like even churches, when he walks up to the body, and this was one of the sound effects that I was talking about that I didn't want to mention yet, the pulling of church off of the pavement or the ground, and you like, it's like Velcro, like it's, and then even the way that they, like, whatever puppets or whatever they did for the church effects, the cat, are so realistic. And there's one particular scene too where this is, I guess, near the end, where he's starting to kind of take out the things that he's resurrected, but he gets a shot in church, and the shot of the cat actually like kind of fainting a little bit and stumbling around before it just curls up, it looks so real. And I've always been a little bit concerned about that, but just on a visceral level, I was just like, oh my God, like it really is showing the process and the aftermath of death in such a way that I think a lot of horror movies do it more, like they're trying to entertain you, even if it is a slasher. It's an over the top kill, or it's whatever it is. This just feels so matter of fact, and then like just the natural reality of it all, like having to take your cat and peel it off of the road so that you can bury it, that it's in itself, I think, has a certain sadness to it that not a lot of other campy horror movies would. And then
going to like kind of a silly, spooky, you know, sort of cemetery where you're being like, we're gonna bury this. And I mean, it's some beautiful location, like that mountain sunset location they find in the sort of rocky ritual circle sort of production design that they use as Judd, you know, takes him through the sort of arduous journey there. And, you know, he's committing you know, this perverse act. He doesn't, you know, totally understand the sort of grim severity of it yet, but he does when he kind of asks the question, what did we do tonight? And you know, they end up finding out that this cat is going to come back and it's alive, and some of the effects are a little funny, but the performance by the cat, I think, is pretty fucking good. The glowing yellow eyes and the more sort of a feral and kind of aggressive behavior, and doing things like throwing dead rats at him in the bathtub is pretty funny. The big hissing sort of fits that he's having.
Do you know what? I also love, this was a part where Judd is showing him the cemetery, I think, for the first time. But when they go up the mountain, there's a part where he like hears creatures, and Judd actually stops him and is just kind of looking around nervously. And it has to imply that there's been these like resurrected creatures within the forest that haven't been killed, and they're just kind of wandering and everything. Because that seems to be like that fearful moment. They never
maybe
do
that's
anything
meant to be a hint at the Wendigo that they didn't do.
Yeah, maybe actually that might be. It was like the one scene they could kind of fit in with the stuff they had to remove. That would make sense.
Well, another thing you brought up that I think is very on point. I think both of you were talking about this, is how patient the movie is. Like when we think about like the impact and the weight of the deaths and the violence of the film, I think it is the fact that it takes a little bit of time to acquaint us with the characters and with their dynamic. The family dynamic is like, you know, it's more complex, I suppose, than maybe some of its contemporaries were.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for some people, like, there's an issue a lot of horror movies, I think, have now, where sometimes they're patient in the sense that they wait an hour to do the setup. Yeah, and that's something that I think that this movie doesn't do. I think this movie actually does the setup you expect of it at the pace you expect of it. It just then does a second setup into we're taking it further than you would probably expect us to. And I think that is where that hits. So, like, you know, when you know it's the movie where the kid dies and he buries the kid, then maybe you're like, oh, it takes an hour to get there. But I didn't know that the first time I watched this movie, and it's kind of challenged me to go, oh, this is going to turn into something else. And I found that a very rewarding structure for the film to have. And I know that this is from what I understand in the book, and for a lot of people in the book, they didn't expect to hit that midpoint and be like, what the hell? Like, I guess this is going to be a longer book than I thought it was going to be. And yeah, I think that that's something that King understood when he was adapting his own work, that this was something that was going to hit for people, and how death was just going to be piling up around these characters, because it doesn't even start with the kid. I forgot until I rewatched it that it actually starts with the maid. Who gets cancer and like commits suicide, and it was Stephen King briefly cameos as sort of the priest at her funeral there. And obviously you have the accident, the guy at the accident in the sort of college hospital, and the cat die, and on all of these things where he has to really start wrestling with, you know, there is so much death around me all the time. Like, what the hell is that? And that's the scene where they later have Jamie, the one you already referred to, where he has to, you know, really explain that, you know, I have faith in that to my kid. And you throw in those crazy flashbacks too of the wife's version of dealing with death with her sister Zelda, and the sort of monstrous version of what do they call it? It's like spinal meningitis, they call it, that turns her into basically functionally sort of like this creature. And part of it, you wonder if is it a little exaggerated because it's a child, you know, sometimes sometimes they'll exaggerate the sort of the monstrous features and how it made them feel, and, you know, the way that, you know, she had to essentially take care of her sister while her parents tried to ignore this thing, and she had to just sit here and look at death. And it builds to all of this before that truck runs that kid over. And so by the time it hits it, you're like, Jesus, stop.
It's really built up. That's why I find this, like, it works as a horror movie, but it honestly is very sad and harrowing. Like, it feels like there is, like you said, Josh, there's like a gut punch to it that I don't think some of these other horror movies have in the same way. Not to say, you know, this film is perfect. I just think it's incredibly unique that way, and that's why it works the way it does.
Everyone has an unhealthy relationship and history with death before the movie decides we're going to steamroll a child on screen for you.
And that whole setup too is just unbelievable. They have, it's like the most idyllic like afternoon where they're having a picnic with the neighbors, and it's the perfect sunny skies. It's no clouds are in the sky. You know, perfectly green grass. Everything is great.
Slow motion of the kid's hair and him being like, I love you, Daddy. Or, you know, like
again, my poor friend Maddie, they did the I love you, Daddy thing, and she goes, oh, that's so cute. In my notes, I'm like, you poor girl, you don't even know what's about to happen here. And then they start to kind of telegraph it, right? Where it's like he starts to throw the ball to him, and then it goes over, so he starts to run towards the ball.
He didn't build a fence, which is maybe rule number one, man.
Come on, man. Like, he almost gets hit in the first 10 minutes of this movie. You build a fence after that, brother. But yeah, it's and the way that they do it, again, they really do kind of milk it to a point where, you know, maybe you could say that it's like, it's almost like trolling you in a way, but it's
a little tasteless.
Yeah, but I take to it. I definitely think it works really well. And the way that they do the actual hit, because obviously they can't show like the cutest 2-year-old in the world just get absolutely mangled. I don't even think the Sleazoids would want to see that probably. So what they do is they have this like crazy kind of cuts back and forth where it shows the kid and it shows him focused, and then they blur him out and show the oncoming truck coming towards him, and then they do like a cut where
a trucker so distracted rocking out to Sheena is a punk rocker.
Yeah.
He doesn't see that cute little kid.
And it cuts back from like the point of view of the truck to the point of view of the kid until it gets so close that it's indiscernible, and then they do like they throw a shoe basically off camera and just have it roll and be kind of bloody, and that's the symbol of like the child being killed and hit.
Wow, I was like, speaking of Mike's Fulci comparison, that's some of the stuff that I sometimes think about when I think about Fulci, is how often what his horror was the horror of what was destined to happen, the fatalism of when you watch part of what makes a Fulci movie scary is the pure unrelenting dread of how long the sequences go on for. I mean, I just rewatched The Beyond, and part of what I think about the defining horror image from Fulci for so many people is obviously what he does to people's eyes. Does a tarantula bite it open and it leaks everywhere? Does it pop out? All these things. The magic is the 3 minutes of him being like, oh yeah, that eyeball's getting closer to that nail.
Yeah.
Did you see that nail? Did you see that eyeball? Did you see that zombie? Look where he's pushing her. Yeah. That is what I get out of this sequence when I go, this kid's getting run over by this truck. You know it before it happens because of the visual vocabulary, and for me that's what's unbearable. Yeah. You sit there and you go, fuck off.
Yeah, you're like you don't want to say it, but you're like, it's almost like, just rip the Band-Aid off, we know it's coming, holy shit. Like it just, the amount of time they take to make this the cutest child in the entire cinematic all of cinema before they take him out is unbelievable. And then they do this thing where, like, I personally like it. I could understand someone thinking it's like too campy or corny. I like his slow motion scream, and I especially like it because it flashes into just pictures of Gage being born. Like, you're like, what the, like, it's a pylon of emotion. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the slow motion shot of the bloody shoe, like twirling. You know,
right? Like, oh my God, the amount of just devastation in 3 minutes is
it's the moments like that where you can tell this was made by someone who has a control of what to do with like music video, someone who knows the power of a rhythm. Cut, knows the power of a, you know, an insert shot like that, you know, like this for me is where Lambert, I think, shows the most skill as a director, is in the moments like these.
Yeah. And then it leads into further questions with the daughter, because it's like he's had to answer questions about the cat. Now he has to answer questions about her dead little brother. And she's saying things like, you know, if God could give him back, right? If he wanted to. And it's just because that's what you told me. That's how much power God has. And so now he's sitting here like, are you kidding me? I have to try to fucking explain this now. It's just,
well, and see, that's why I like his like when he gets put into these harder and harder corners and he starts to like kind of retreat, because he literally doesn't know what like a good father is supposed to do in scenarios like that. It's when his performance plays a little bit stronger for me, because like when he's like, he can't even comfort his daughter or his family, and certainly not his fucking father-in-law who tries to blame him and fucking fight him. That scene at the fucking funeral. Again, these are the kinds of scenes I feel like the campy horror movie doesn't include. It doesn't include like the father-in-law being like, you fucking did this and I'm gonna and
it's
fighting him.
It's Ferreira film, man. Like they knock over the coffin, and then they open the coffin briefly just to show his hand, and then it closes again.
Crazy.
It's just like the details of that, to put that in your supposedly campy horror movies.
It's just unpleasant. It's just what it is. It's punishing.
Yeah, it's definitely, absolutely.
And I think that's part of the benefit of having King adapt his own novel, because he's not just interested in like the campy genre elements. Like, he's a serious writer. He's dealing with serious themes. And I think that's one thing for me that makes this film stand out. Like, there are some shortcomings in the tone and some of the performances and stuff like that. But I think in terms of like a faithful adaptation that still manages to fit within the confines of a genre movie, it's managing that balance pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, because it definitely, like, the whole movie has a weird tension between the fact that a studio is clearly trying to greenlight a fun 80s horror film, and King is swerving in places where that isn't like, it's not like, I still find this movie
overall.
fun, but like you do get to a certain point where he keeps laying on the death and the unpleasantness and the punishment and the misery that this family is going through, that it does go beyond that to the point that it's hard to imagine people finding it fun. But because it has that look and because it sometimes has that tone, that I find that rewarding about it, not necessarily like an issue with the film, even though I could see maybe someone else feeling that tug is a little awkward or the push and pull is a little awkward. But totally. I think that this movie for me gets better as it gets into that stuff, and as Judd gets into the very iconic, that sometimes dead is better. Yeah. And it's like, dude, you showed him this place. Why did you show him this place?
That is like, that's the one thing that I think I get a little bit of that, like, I have to do the suspension of disbelief thing a bit with his character, where he claims that he just felt like, I've been in that position before. You as a father, it's so hard to explain to your young kids like how death works and what and loss and all of that. So I just, out of a moment of weakness, I took you up there and showed this thing to you or whatever. But I do like that. Because of that, we do get a very regretful scene where they're drinking together, and he just does this amazing like delivery and physical performance where he like slams his hand on the table and he's just like, "Damn it, I may have murdered your son," and has like because he feels as if he's disturbed the spirits by showing him this thing, and that is it's almost like now they've locked in on his family and like death is coming no matter what. It's like an actual vengeful spirit. I think they also mentioned, it's a very Stephen King thing where he says something like it was done on a Native American burial ground or something like that. I think they say something like that just to put that classic trope in there, but regardless.
Classic horror trope.
yeah. But regardless, it has this feeling of like the spirits have been awoken and now they're after your family, and Judd feels guilty about that. I like the scene and I like the performance.
Well, yeah, and it's the same thing that the ghost warns him about. He was, even beyond that, they messed with the natural way of things, and that is ultimately what they've kind of opened up here, and that is definitely what is making the dad just increasingly more depressed and increasingly more dead-eyed as he's making the decision to obviously dig up his kid's grave while the wife is out with her family, going through that foggy nighttime trek sort of through the shadowy forest with the son's corpse to get to that moonlit burial ground, and going through the entire physical arduous act of doing it full well with the knowledge of when the cat came back, it didn't work, and it wasn't. And that to me is what makes that he makes that decision anyway. It's an incredibly stupid, incredibly flawed decision that I think a normal movie watcher might be frustrated by, but it's entirely made out of despair. And I think the movie up until that point has done a good job of showing you, what that despair is and how it is so difficult to let go. And here he is unable to do it, to the point where that kid is going to come back and do like some straight up like child's play antics as a fucking haunted laughing baby, fucking slashing ankles with the scalpel from underneath the bed and doing like the Chucky face as he's like straight up like biting Judd's throat.
I also gotta say, I love that at one point they give, like, he's holding the scalpel and they give him a top hat and like a little like tuxedo thing. It's almost as if like while he was waiting for everybody to come into the house and kill them, he's like, well, I better get swagged out here. I mean, look, here's the top hat, here's the little, I love his outfit. And I think too, it's so interesting because I do think that you could find it a little bit still, like, it's campy and it's still kind of even funny in a way, but I do think it's really cool that they have the actual 2-year-old actor doing all of these things and saying the lines and trying to make it as creepy as possible. And what I think, even though it has like some cuteness to it because you have a 2-year-old doing this, there's a creepiness to how disconnected his vocal delivery is to like how he's answering the people that are in the house, like saying things like, I want to play, and having like a 2-year-old actually try to say that in his mind of what is creepy or however they directed him has this really strange uncanny valley thing to it that just feels it just feels bizarre, I guess.
Yeah, I love that phone call when he goes, first I play with Judd.
Yeah.
Then mommy came over and I played with her. You know,
Yeah.
now I play with you. And again, the body count is just like going up because he's biting the old guy's fucking throat. The mom makes her way all the way there, and you know, she goes in for sort of like a hug and he scalpels her. Yeah. And
and the mother scene, this is actually the scene that freaked me out the most when I was a kid. It's that scene where she goes into the room, and for a moment, because of all the death happening, she has like a kind of an anxiety attack or a flashback to her sister Zelda, and there's the shot where Zelda is kind of like she's further away from the camera, but the camera is kind of on this corner tilt, and she's looking out the window and talking to the person that's in the door frame, which is the mother, and then eventually she kind of like. She goes closer to the camera, and there's this almost, I don't know if it's like a wide lens or a fisheye lens or anything, but it just feels too close up and kind of strange the way that the angle is, and her just like yelling at her like, I can't remember what she says. She says something like she's gonna twist her spine like hers was or something like that, but it's just so creepy.
Yeah, the wide angle lens, like point of view shot of that coming towards you is definitely
and as
creepy.
A kid, that just freaked me the hell out. So I've always remembered that one as something kind of scary. But yeah, it's a cool sequence. And even when the dad comes in to the house to kind of face off with Gage, he first has this like
to put his cat and his child down, by the way, like with the sort of injection needle, which is kind of a crazy thing to, you know, first he does it to the cat, which is unpleasant to watch, and then you're like, oh, but they've set up that he needs to do this to the kid as well.
Yeah, and we just and we know how, you know, harrowing it was to lose the kid once, and now he's got to do it again and do it by his own hand. It's pretty wild. And we forgot this, but that image right before this of him just taking out the body from the grave and holding it is like, oh my God, that is just so sad. It's just unbelievably heartbreaking.
Well, it's pure Poe, and I think that's part of what works for me with Lewis's descent. It's very much like a Poe narrative, like the Black Cat. There's this Poe line about the spirit of perverseness, like you do what's wrong because you know it's wrong. Like there's something very human about that. Like he knows it's not going to end well, but in this deranged way, he's like compelled to do it nevertheless. It's so Poe.
And there's also when he's like taking the body to the cemetery to bury him and resurrect him. There's moments too where it starts to get really wild. Like the forest starts to literally crash around him, like trees are just falling over him and stuff. And then there's
the world is telling him you are doing a completely unnatural, perverse thing. Like everyone is warning you, and he does it anyway. But that's the emotional power of it, right? Is that this guy cannot live without his son, and then he sees what that looks like, and he realizes he's causing even more damage. Now he has to think about a world where he doesn't live without his wife, and then he has to think about a world where he's dead. And you know, there's some perverse factor in the descent quality of where this film ends up going, which is that the whole family just fucking goes down. Like death consumes every major character in this movie.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so sad too when, you know, Gage is coming towards him. The one thing that I do love is when he it's a really wild thought to think that Gage like set up that body of the woman. It might be his wife. And like hangs her and then like pushes the body out of the attic. Just to imagine the 2-year-old doing that was something that was just in my brain. But then they do this kind of like child's play animatronic leap from like when the camera goes up and you see Gage in the attic, and he almost looks like
it's a creepy puppet Gage.
Creepy puppet Gage that dives at the dad. Again, it's like it's whether I guess
he literally hurls that child across the room as the puppet version.
He eats the child. Yes. Oh my God. But yeah, this whole thing, like Gage coming up to him, the dad tricking him into getting closer, and he, you know, gets him in the neck with the syringe. I think what's his name? The boy, Miko Hughes, the young actor. I think he's really good at like reacting to that stuff. He starts screaming and yelling. We do get a very funny and adorable line to him where he turns around. He's just like, not fair. That shit. I think it works for everyone I've ever watched it with, but I do get that if, it does undercut some of the tension and the horror, but I think I don't know, I love it, to be honest. It feels like there's one moment where his kid is almost there and then he dies, and it's very sad, of course. But
well, I mean, yeah, the moment where he briefly turns back into his real son just in time to like collapse and die in his arms, right? Like that's definitely where it hits tries to go back again into that. And again, I think that's going to be the push and pull between, is this a campy 80s sort of like almost like a creature premise of like, the son's a puppet that's stabbing him and you got to yeet it, and then and then going right back into what is the base of the entire thing, which is just the unimaginable despair and loss that this family is going through. And yeah, I think there's probably people out there where that whiplash doesn't work and it doesn't make sense. I've always been someone for this particular movie that it did. So but and yeah, I mean his son's corpse literally just hitting the floorboards, and his wife's like hanged feet like dangling in front of him, and deluding himself into thinking because the wife died so recently that her burial and resurrection will go differently, so doing it to her too. And you're just going, man, I think you've seen enough evidence. You are a doctor at a certain point.
I was watching some behind the scenes, and I can't remember who it was, if it was like one of the assistant directors or some like a producer or something, but he had a take that was kind of like, he thinks he also might be doing it to just, it's a way of killing himself, because he's just like, we know what this is going to lead to, but at the same time we have those lines of him kind of showing out of desperation, like, oh, maybe it'll work this time. So it doesn't necessarily work as a theory, but it makes a little more sense just given how many times he's seen this. But killing your child would also make you go pretty fucking crazy. So I don't know. Like, I think it works for me. He's
not in a normal psychic state when he makes that decision.
Absolutely.
For
Definitely not.
Absolutely. I do also love the ghost for the final time being like, don't do it. No. And just fades away. And like, he's totally screwed.
And then speaking of a fucking zombified wife with like leak coming from her gory eye while she kisses him and grabs the knife from the kitchen table.
Dude, my God,
that's the Fulci.
Yeah, that's a Fulci.
There it is again.
Sure.
Yeah,
and especially the perversity of them full on making out, like just raunchy makeout session while she's oozing out of the eyeball and half of her face is missing, and it's just, oh my God. Also, I don't particularly love, I know that this is the thing that I was saying earlier on with the studio where they said they needed a more like definitive ending. I think originally they were just going to have the hand go over the door and it would imply that, she's back, but we don't know what's going to happen. Most likely she's going to kill him. But there's this kind of ambiguous nature of like, what if it did work this last time because of the
I do like the idea of ending a little earlier, just in the sense
that's how the novel ends.
Yeah, it ends earlier? Oh.
Yeah, I think it ends with like he's just playing solitaire and he doesn't even know what's going to happen. It's something like that. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, you might see the hand. I think he like knows she's entering the room in the novel. I can't remember if he even sees her hand or not, but it's there is that element of uncertainty.
So he just acknowledges that she's back. I do like the idea of ending on that note of him being like the hope of being like, maybe this is the time that it worked, because I mean that speaks to so much of every decision he makes in this movie, is having that little bit of that yearning for it, even if it's not possible. And you could definitely see a studio being like, that's a little arty and ambiguous, so have her fucking kill him and scream
and just scream. I think it's the scream that gets me. It's like I would have almost preferred them to make out, because I like the shots where she, the hand and then her feet as she walks up.
That's what I was saying with the movie. If you just end on the romantic beat of him, being able to kiss his zombified wife and giving him that moment, and it was worth it for that moment. Even if you don't see anything else,
and even if you want to still include the knife, I don't necessarily think she needs to grab it and hold it up and then he screams. I think that's a little ridiculous. But even if they were making out and then the camera like pans down to a knife and then it blacks out or something or whatever it needs to do. I feel like a little bit more of an ambiguous thing would have been better for that. And so I disagree with the studio on that note, but regardless, it works for me.
Hey, Paramount had people they needed to be leaving the theater being like, I got one last kill,
all of it.
smash cut to I don't want to be buried
in Pet Sematary. That song is kind of a banger. Yeah, apparently
I love that song.
The like fans at the time didn't like it, which I guess is probably because it's more on their popular end, I would imagine. But I like pop music too, so I dug it. I enjoyed it.
Well, I mean, and we have to thank the weird connection between Stephen King and Mary Lambert, because she was a music video director who knew the Ramones, and the Ramones was his favorite band. And this only happened because the two of them collaborated on a movie together. And she said, I could put you in touch with them. I bet you they'd do something for me, you know? Like,
that's awesome. Yeah. I think it's cool.
Stephen King had his dream realized of the Ramones doing a theme song for one of his books.
That's awesome.
But I want to hear their Dreamcatcher song.
What would that be? Oh, man. Oh. Yes.
It'd be like prog rock.
2003, too. I have to
so many things. There's so much going on in that movie.
There's so many details. They'd have to throw in Blue Bayou. They'd have to throw in Scooby-Doo. And it would need to fit like more of a new metal trend too.
That's true for 2003. That's right.
Okay, damn. We're cooking up an alternate universe here. But I mean that's gonna wrap it up for Pet Sematary. Here we are going to enter the reductive rating round real quick, which for Mike, it's been long enough. We might need to throw it back to you here, but this is where we remove all the words and all the nuance and go to a rating between 1 and 5. But for Pet Sematary to me has always been a fairly solid 4. Again, I think this is one of his best premises, and I do think that Paramount, having it translated to the screen in both a way that's faithful and gave him power to realize it, but that also, at least for them, fit a couple of their cheesy sort of late 80s campy horror trends that they wanted to see it packaged into. It sounds like something that should work a lot less than it does. And I'm always impressed every time I watch it that just hiring the director of Madonna music videos, having her know King's work enough to be like, I'm going to tone that side of myself down to give you this kind of broad daytime, rural Maine kind of picture perfect Americana imagery. And then in specific moments, I'm going to use the video background to heighten colors or shadows or angles or production design or editing to hit these sort of disturbing sequences when you get the kid getting hit by a truck, or you get the gory ghost sleepwalking stuff, or you get the meningitis sister flashbacks and the wide angle lenses. And there are stylish moments that hit that she gets an opportunity to with the horror, but it is usually in direct unpleasant contrast to the more bright and colorful and corny elements of the movie, which is something that King always playfully, tonally lurched between, even in his own storytelling, when it was cute, silly family stuff and then genuinely bleak and morbid horror. And so in some ways you could argue this is someone, and maybe you don't want King to be adapted as faithfully as he is. You could argue sometimes when people broke from it, it's the best stuff. But, if you do like that element, I think this is one of the better examples of a filmmaker being really, really faithful to him. And also it just so happened to be at a time when, for him, he was like, I'm going to be pretty honest to this material, and I am going to maintain the fact that this came from a dark place of having to explain mortality to a child and how uncomfortable and unpleasant that was. And it maintains that. And so for me, it just gives me both things that I wanted of this movie. It gives you the really goofy idea of a pet cemetery where a cat comes back from the dead and starts attacking people. And it just has this slow, perverse descent into the unnatural extremes of where you could possibly take that premise. And it's really unafraid to do that. So that's how it kind of overcomes some of the spottier qualities of the film for me, which is mostly, I think, that Lambert doesn't have a ton of control over some of the performances and some of the tonal whiplash that she does. But some of the sequences I think are fantastic. The cat, the kid, and Herman Munster I think are giving great performances, even better than some of the other main characters in the film. And as it sort of careens into the more bizarre, uncanny, grief-stricken melodrama stuff, the movie just gets better and better for me. So yeah, I think this is a very solid 4.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've really liked this movie since I snuck it on television on cable when I was like 12. It's just kind of freaked me out. I think that just the thought of the death always around you, I think they really do well with that feeling throughout the film. I like the production design when it goes a little bit more campy, like with the graveyard setup and how it's kind of like ritualistically set up where it's all in a circle and kind of this almost pentagram kind of thing. I think I agree that some of the tonal whiplash can be maybe a little bit. It works for me, but I could imagine that it wouldn't work for other people. I think what it does for me is it gives that effect of just like, you have the melodrama with the family and you get kind of sunk into that. And then all of a sudden it's back to the horror film where we're, seeing all this death and every once in a while gore. And it just feels like it's kind of getting closer and closer to the family. And I think the whiplash effects for the most part work for me. I think a lot of the performances I think that you highlighted, Josh, are definitely my favorite. I can see what you mean by Dale Midkiff's kind of stiffness. I do think it works for me because it almost works for me on like an average everyday dad mode a little bit, where it's like nothing eccentric or very over the top about him, but he's just kind of just trying his best.
I was going to say until he is. I think some people highlight like the way he rolls out of that bed and freaks out at one point. Like it's a very awkward bit of acting. For me, I think that moment works because it's such an extreme form of grief that he is awkwardly realizing with his body. You could almost call it an experimental physical performance, but some people would just go, I don't know if it's very controlled or very good.
Sure. And I mean, iconic child performance. I think Miko Hughes is just adorable. And then when he has to kind of go villain mode, I think he's clearly having a bit of fun with it, even as a 2-year-old. I don't know how much understanding he had of what he was doing, but I do find him very entertaining. And when they milk the cute factor before they kill him off, he's good. He's a cute boy. And also the end, the thought of the daughter being left with no family, which they don't really highlight, but that is like really fucking sad. And that would be something to highlight to make this film even more of a gut punch. But I think it's probably necessary they just focus in on Lewis. But yeah, just that thought I had afterwards where I'm like, they don't go back to her, but that's it. I mean, she's got her grandparents, but they don't seem like the nicest people. And like her entire family over this, I don't know, month has just completely died. So it's a wild thought. 4 out of 5. Very good.
Yeah. For you, Mike.
I mean, I have a hard time rating movies. I stopped consistently rating movies on Letterboxd a long time ago. But this is a movie where I have like such a strong personal relationship to it. I almost can't see it for what it is. I don't know if you guys have movies like that as well.
Oh, but totally.
It's so like so I have to give it 5 because it's like part of my DNA as a writer and as a person. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hell yeah. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for Pet Sematary here. We're going to be right back, and you're going to want to stick around because we're going to be talking some absolute Stephen King insanity coming up next here with Dreamcatcher.
I can't see this.
On March 21st, evil slips through.
What do you want? Come with me, Owen. I'll show you things you wish you'd never seen.
All right, we are back and we are talking Dreamcatcher, the 2003 science fiction horror film written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan, co-written, I guess I should say, by William Goldman, who was helping Kasdan adapt his Stephen King's novel from 2001. And starring a pretty ridiculous cast, including Thomas Jane, Jason Lee, Damian Lewis, Timothy Oliphant, as 4 childhood friends who get stuck in a sort of a winter cabin trip in Maine, a hunting trip, and end up dealing with a pretty crazy alien invasion body horror scenario, and run into various fun characters while they do it, including Morgan Freeman, Tom Sizemore, Donnie Wahlberg with a sort of late appearance in the film. This is our second time actually talking about Lawrence Kasdan as a director. The last time was his sexy Florida hothouse update on Double Indemnity, the 1984 film Body Heat with William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, which is really good. And he's come up a few times as a writer as well, though, obviously, since he was often brought out into George Lucas projects and Steven Spielberg projects to touch up their screenplays for Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think might have been the last time we talked about him.
Yeah.
But he spent most of his 80s and 90s trying to really establish himself as like another prestige Hollywood writer-director option for studios who were making dramas or romances, things like The Big Chill or French Kiss. Westerns was something he was really interested in, Silverado, Wyatt Earp. Unfortunately, largely a lot of these movies kind of failed to catch on in the same way they did for his pals George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, which is maybe too high of a comparison point for a lot of directors to reach anyway. Like it's not a huge, this guy got to make studio movies for like 2 decades. So yeah. He definitely saw some success. It's just not quite, I think, what he had hoped when he was writing those guys' screenplays in the 80s. But I have really no idea, and I wish I owned like a special edition release so I had some sort of special feature about it. No idea what drew him to making his first horror film and why his first horror film was going to be Dreamcatcher in 2003, and I don't know if it was because King's Name generated box office, or maybe he just picked up the book and he really liked the book and he just read it at one point and he was like, I guess this is what I'm going to do. But he decided this was going to be his project. He was going to co-write it with screenwriter William Goldman, who by 2002 was a guy who had been kind of coasting off the fact that he had won 2 Oscars for screenwriting quite early in his career, for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969 and All the President's Men in 1976.
Damn.
He was obviously also an author himself and knew that entire process on how to adapt books, because he had the Stepford Wives had been adopted from his own novel, and I think Marathon Man and Princess Bride were also him. So he had a lot of success in the 70s, 80s, and by the 90s, I remember us talking about this. He also adapted King before. He did Misery. I forgot he did the screenplay for that. But he was getting a lot of work as a studio script doctor more than he was, sort of writing in the same way he was earlier in his career. And he was definitely working on pulpier material. He did Memoirs of an Invisible Man for John Carpenter. He did Maverick for Richard Donner. He did a John Grisham novel adaptation for James Foley, and the Clint Eastwood's Absolute Power, his fucking like De Palmian thriller about fucking Gene Hackman being a sicko Bill Clinton.
Right, yeah.
And during that time, he also wrote that fucking wild Michael Douglas, Val Kilmer, like African lion version of Jaws, but with like that David Lean colonial biographical drama thing, The Ghost in the Darkness.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest careers I've ever seen someone have, to go from like writing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men to being like, I am punching up studio pulpy films, essentially, which is exactly what he's tasked with doing here with Dreamcatcher. I don't know who got who involved from there, but this is a crazy book. And Mike, could you, as someone who read this book when you were a kid, what was going through your mind when you read this book? And was this the first one or the second one for Stephen King?
It was the second one. I found like the movie tie-in paperback at a convenience store, and I had read and loved. Maybe it had been even I think it was my second, and then I just devoured a ton after that. But I think one interesting thing to note about the novel, and I don't want to step on your toes, maybe you already have this in your notes, but this was the first novel King wrote after he was hit and nearly killed by a van.
I did read about this, but feel free to tell us about it. I'd love to know more.
So he was in like an extraordinary amount of physical pain, and he was on really heavy painkillers when he wrote this book. And he was in so much pain that he couldn't actually physically sit at a desk and write at a typewriter or a word processor. So he wrote the whole novel by pen. and it's a long novel. It's like almost 1,000 pages long. So it has this kind of loopy, psychedelic, but also like really kind of intense physical pain aspect. It's a very bizarre novel. Like there's nothing like it in his oeuvre.
Would you say overall this is a pretty accurate adaptation of what you felt like the tone was, the characters, the plotting, that kind of thing?
I think as much as it can be. Like the novel is so much about consciousness. Like the second half of the novel, a lot of it is these kind of like crazy chase sequences from one mind to another. And he's really pushing his interest in like ESP and telekinesis and stuff like that in the novel too. And you can see them trying to bring that into the film. They have like a metaphysical aspect where they even like all the guys supposedly have this like, they call it the mind warehouse or something. And no, I don't think any of them other than the character Jonesy goes into it, but there is like an actual space where they are in that space and you can kind of see
it's the same way you've seen like a mind palace depicted in like films before, where it's like all of his memories are like in these sort of file folders and how he sort of navigates it. And I will say there are some crazy filmmaking choices of being like going to and from this like almost mind palace area. Like there is one specific transition where they're literally, you're in the real world and then the camera kind of like cranes away from that and like through a window, and then you're in the mind palace, and then it's like a character looking through the window into the world and stuff. And so they are trying to find that connectability between those things, but there are really only a few targeted kind of moments like that. Otherwise they are kind of trying to sell you on the fact that this is a $68 million movie where there is going to be military men firing guns at each other and at aliens.
I did not see. You know what was wild about this experience for me is that I've heard about Dreamcatcher forever, but I didn't know anything about it. I remember when I was young, so this was 2003, so I was 11 or so. I would go into the movie theater and I remember seeing the poster when this was out, and I was just so intrigued by it because of the Dreamcatcher itself. It's in like that snowy highway, a man's just sitting there kind of ominously. And I was curious, like, what could this possibly be? And my brain started to just form this thing of like, it has to be more mysterious and psychedelic and whatever, ambiguous even. And then when like, I don't remember the marker in this movie, but it might even be halfway or not halfway, but like 30 minutes in or so, where they start to do the alien stuff. I was like, oh, this is what this movie is. It's like The Thing or Independence Day or something like that. I did not think that this is where this was going. And then when they eventually include like Morgan Freeman as the army guy and they start having the heli fights and all that, I was not expecting what this ended up being. And that was a major part of it. The kind of alien action military aspect of it was shocking.
Yeah. I have to say on first pass, this is one of the more deranged Hollywood
like
movies
too, though,
that I think I've seen people make in this way. There's so much about it that seems so obviously like a studio person would watch it and be like, this is the most ill-conceived movie I've ever seen. And yet I was kind of mesmerized by this movie. And it was partially because I have not read the source material, but I know enough of his material to see King remixing so many of his career-long obsessions, obviously, in here, and the context, obviously, that he's doing it fucking stoned on painkillers, practically in a fever dream where he can't even write properly, like, is a good way of describing, I think, what ended up, I am assuming, on the page and faithfully being adapted here. But like, there are stretches of this movie where I went, this felt like someone who was like trying to almost put so many Kingisms into like a King super fan trying to write a King movie, but it being adapted with completely straight faces by guys who like don't see the humor in trying to like remix so much King stuff, and you know, and that was the whiplash effect that this movie had on me, where it was like, this is pretty seriously made with expensive resources for what is like King stoned out of his mind writing nonsense. And it was kind of unbelievable to watch unfold, and I honestly feel bad because I think ultimately I am going to be, you know, a little negative about some of the things we talk about.
Yeah,
but I don't. But in a way that I could see myself honestly being like, if I had known that that's what it was, I might have had a better, less confusing experience with the movie. Because for anyone who hasn't seen this, like I'm going to like straight up, the broad strokes of this movie is that there is a group of, if you've seen Stand By Me or you've seen It, childhood friends, Stephen King style, who grew up in Derry. They all are given the gift of sort of telepathic sight via a disabled boy named Duddits, who essentially there's flashbacks throughout the film that we'll talk about where they stand up for him and they protect him from some classic King universe sort of asshole bullies who are just being mean for the sake of it. Yeah. And the vast majority of the movie takes place in the sort of present day in 2003, where all of these people are grown-ups. They've kind of had that experience. There is a sort of a bit of a traumatic uniting factor between them all. They are all played here by, we'll talk about each one, but Thomas Jane, Damian Lewis, Timothy Oliphant, and Jason Lee are the actors here. And each one of these characters is a sort of, you know, an underachieving day jobber who gets through the day partially by using their telepathic powers. And I was kind of like, oh, I can see how this is going to be a interesting sort of drama. They're throwing in some, you know, supernatural details. You can see all the normal King qualities of it, I think, early on. You know, maybe you'll talk about some of the dialogue moments between these characters and how they've been written, but you're being like, that's maybe the only weird factor that I think occurs to you maybe early on. And what essentially happens is that there's a annual winter cabin retreat they go on to, and we'll get into more detail about this, but around that time is when the movie makes a flip, and the movie really does full on become what I think I have to imagine in the book is King going back to his childhood love of things like War of the Worlds or like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and kind of doing an alien invasion style B movie, but done in a way that the filmmakers try to do it pretty seriously as like a parasitic body horror film, to the point where it does come on full sci-fi military action film, including like gray aliens being genocided by fascist military members, and all of these friends essentially obviously uniting around the fact that they want to both stop these aliens and they want to stop this sort of fascist military presence who's attacking them. And there's some convoluted elements of like, I think 2 aliens at war with each other, which is like a huge component of like why all the humans are kind of confused about this. And I just genuinely could not believe what this movie was on a scene-to-scene basis for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I really never got my footing.
It's tone, like when we're talking about these tonal whiplashes, especially with Pet Sematary, it still feels like you're grounded in something. Whereas this, it feels like you're being flung around like entirely, and it just. Like from the moment you go, like when we are introduced to these childhood friends, and the first one is Henry, played by Thomas Jane, who's the psychiatrist, the tone of him getting into his patient's head and trying to help him is so bizarre when he is like, oh, this guy is a fat guy who believes he's eating himself to death out of guilt of his mother. So what if I like humiliate this guy about that and not tell him where I got all this information, which they include the detail that he made that guy eat himself to death. And I'm like, this is how you're introduced to this guy and what his powers are. And that seems like it would lead into like very serious kind of like these maybe like power dynamics. Like he does have like he's a psychiatrist, so he has patients that he's supposed to take care of. He's maybe not doing the best job, but it always turns into this like almost weirdly campy, almost comedic thing as the film goes on. But the film, like the way that Kasdan directs it, is that everything is like the color is kind of sucked out from everything. It's on purposely dark and dour and kind of like muted in its colors to give this kind of thriller
which is
effect.
Odd because it's worth noting this is shot by John Seale, who is the guy famous for shooting The Hitcher and Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh shit,
Dead Poets Society.
Dead Poets Society, of course. There's another element of the kids being asking him to do like a spooky winter forest film and kind of do a paranoid body snatching, do a little bit of the Thing kind of quality to it, with obviously doing crazy alien creature effects, a little bit of practical, a little bit of CG, kind of mixing them all together.
Which some are good. I'll have to say.
Some are good.
Even for the CGI at the time, like I think the dark lighting, that's when it definitely has a strength to it, because it masks some of that stuff, and the switch between practical and CGI slugs does work for the most part. It's just like it's weird though when the movie looks like this, and then like, okay, we have the scene where eventually the aliens are kind of like being shown to the audience for the first time, and some guy comes into the cabin and he's really sick and he's got something moving in his stomach, and
it's not only sick, the dude's burping, the dude's farting,
farting, shit, and like all of it, everything's coming out of all ends.
Yeah, this is a classic thing for if anyone read King into the later years, he got a little, I think he had like old man anxiety about the fact that like his body started to fail him, and so he started to get a little bit more we're gonna put disturbing, I mean not disturbing, it's natural, I guess you could say, we're gonna put upsetting elements of like sickness and
impolite,
not being able to piss, and essentially like dark potty humor is what kind of made his way into his books with age. And this is one of the more extreme examples I've ever seen in a movie, because the tone is like the guys are kind of thinking it's funny, but they're also kind of grossed out by it. And
but then
like when we see that alien for the first time, it's literally shit out of him and then held in a toilet as like they're trying to imprison it in a toilet bowl.
Yeah, and let me be clear too that the lighting is not like the Dumb and Dumber scene where Harry shit in his pants. Like this stuff is like still in this dark, disgusting looking like bathroom where now it's all covered in blood, and you even get a shot where the guy like shits out the alien, and then he like full on asshole displayed bloody butthole goes into the bathtub, and like it's truly disgusting. And you're like, but then the friends are acting like that. You get back to Jason Lee and Damian Lewis, and
Jason
like
Lee's practically still in a Kevin Smith movie.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying almost like they're making jokes about it. They're making like butt jokes and poop jokes at a certain point before they go into the actual bathroom to see what kind of mess is being made by the sick guy. Now there is context to this, but there isn't context yet. So for an audience member, you're just like, why did you say that? He does he goes, Scooby Dooby Doo, we got a mission to do. And then they jump into the bathroom door and open it up and see what's going on. But in that moment, I was like, why did you say that? Like, why? Like, what is? Like, I get that you're friends and you might have inside jokes, but it's taking out any of the tension and the kind of body horror elements that you presented to me. And I feel, what I'm explaining is what you were going to experience the entire movie. By the way, like this is
these grown men all talk like they're still 10-year-old friends, but they are put into an extremely absurd situation that is still nonetheless really violent and really, meant to be, upsetting. And this was kind of my main question for you, Mike, is this the tone that you felt reading the book, or do you think that the filmmakers are losing control of something, or this is all deliberate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say like it's a little bit of each. Okay. The novel is definitely more like, obviously it's a lot longer. It has more room to breathe. So getting to know the dynamic between these guys in the book, it feels more natural on the written page somehow, the dynamic between all of them. Okay. Although one thing that is not in the novel, actually, I'll bracket that because I want to talk about the ending, which is very different in the novel.
Okay. I'm excited to hear how the novel ends, because the movie has a bizarre ending.
Yeah, does it ever? Yeah, but I mean, I guess maybe it's because I love the book so much, but I kind of love the dynamic between these guys. Like, I love how tender they are toward each other. I love King's narratives about people who share like a trauma and maintain a certain kind of childlike, not naivete, but they have some hold on childhood. Like, they're still tethered to the past in this way that I find really interesting.
For sure. Are they this crude in the book though? Like, are they drinking brewskis and talking about blowjobs at the table and like, okay,
that does sound like King for sure. Cause he even does that with like, well, I guess he even does that when they do a flashback before they save the kid from the bullies. They're talking about like, it's like like pussy and all that stuff, but they're like
That's from the
13
book.
years old. And so they're obviously kind of doing it like almost like they're playing. It's performative a little bit. So I do like those aspects of it. Like I like that they have Kingisms built within all of the characters. And there's certain things with like Stephen Kingisms that work for me, and then others that are clearly just he's trying too hard to be almost like eccentric and writerly every once in a while. But there's a charm to that, I find. Like there's that scene, I think we were just mentioning it, but they're around the dinner table and talking, and they do talk like they talk as if there's inside jokes that you don't quite understand every once in a while. And I think that's a cool aspect to how he writes. Like I said before, sometimes that makes you feel strange and like it's undercutting some of the tension or whatever. Like there's another moment where I think it's Thomas Jane's character. He's traveling along the snowy road, and this is after Damian Lewis gets changed, which we'll talk about. But he's in his direction, and he's singing like the Mighty Mouse theme song randomly to himself and shit. And I'm just kind of like, okay, I understand that this is like a King moment, but why are you saying this? Because again, we don't quite have the context for why it's happening yet. And it might be one of those things that he's trying to draw you in, like it's an intrigue. Like why do they keep bringing these old television shows up and all of that stuff? It's clearly
these
something
guys
they
just
connect
behave
with.
like children, even in situations where you think that would like maybe it would be severe enough that they would stop doing that. But even late in the movie, there's one line Thomas Jane gets where he's like, "Where are you, Jonesy? Pick up the phone and call 1-800-HENRY."
Yeah.
And he's like saying this to like himself. He's not even in a car with anyone who's friends with him.
Right.
Like,
that's I know that's where it feels.
It's just his personality, you know, I guess.
And it feels as if like that's where when I say Kingism, sometimes it almost feels as if characters talk like they know that someone's watching them. You know what I mean? And so when he says something like that, but by himself, you are like, is this guy just like the quirkiest dude ever? Like, I don't understand why he's saying it in this moment, because he's not saying it to make his friend laugh, or he's not.
Yeah, because it makes sense early on when these guys are first hanging out with each other.
Totally.
And like you meet Jonesy, played by Damian Lewis, Mr. Homeland and Billions himself, who is the high school teacher, who is the guy who's like, you know, using his powers to kind of, he's the one trying to, I guess, do a little bit of good, I guess. He is actually trying to be a good teacher. He knows a student cheats, but he doesn't punish him for it, even though he does telepathically know that. Pete, the Timothy Oliphant character, Deadwood and Justified, obviously is the guy who's a little bit more skeezy with how he uses his, because he's a car salesman who's trying to use it almost as like a magic trick to get a date with a woman who's lost her keys. And I don't really know if they explain what Jason Lee's character Beaver does. He just kind of seems like he's doing something in the Kevin Smith universe. He's hanging out at the bars, and he's the one who calls them on the night that Jonesy is the one who nearly gets hit by a car and nearly killed, which is obviously something that was literally happened to King, and something he was kind of reckoning with in this material. And it leads to them sort of 6 months later, the fellas all meeting up for their annual hunting trip in the snowy winter forest of Maine. Their little hole in the wall where the fellas kind of get away from it. They get to sort of honor the memory of this sort of disabled kid named Douglas Duddits, who they saved from bullies. And this is somehow where the Dreamcatcher gets put into it. They have Dreamcatchers like sort of around the place. I don't know that it's properly explained in the movie. No. Okay, Mike shaking his head. You guys can't see it. Mike shaking his head. It's not explained.
He probably has a whole fucking chapter on it in the book. Based on some ancient history or something.
There's some incredible details to this, like the fact that they all fucking love Blue Bayou, and there's literally a part when they go into the Mind Palace and there's a folder that has the lyrics to Blue Bayou that he's literally storing in there. Obviously that's where they start throwing in sort of the similar to It. They throw in the sort of nonlinear flashback stuff to Derry, where you do get some of those specific details, where the details, I feel like that writerly thing where you set it up early and it comes back later, but they're so strange that you're like, how did they even come up in the first place? Like, why is he singing Blue Bayou to calm this kid down? And why did the Scooby-Doo lunchbox like literally become their life and the most important bit of production design that ends up appearing in the finale of the movie?
And they almost have this like, and again, this is very Kingism stuff, because it's like it has it too when they're kids, and I think that's based in the 50s or 60s, and I think that's supposed to be when this is like, isn't this like this flashback? It says 20 years earlier, But
It'd be like the 80s.
So this is meant to be the 80s, I think.
The 80s, but
yeah.
it's strange because I feel like they talk like they're in the 50s. Like they have
it kind of has that also that warm looking tone too. Of like, I mean, maybe I think it's just because we're like, oh, Stand By Me, that our brains go, well, he made those in the 80s, so that's why they go back to the 50s.
Same kind of group of kids, and but it does have this very like just the way they talk, like when the bully's just like, wait, you know that I could kick your ass, but you're gonna stick up to me anyway, and then he's just like, because it's wrong, and I'll tell the world. Like shit like that just feels so. It's like over the top.
Yeah, maybe you've heard of our friend. He's the best sprinter in school.
Shit like that. Yeah, like he's like, before you can even throw a punch, he's gonna be telling everybody about what's going on here. Like
he's gonna be tattling.
And then you cut back to the bullies, and like when you listen to that dialogue, you're like, that's kind of funny and just humorous and a little silly. And then the bullies, you cut back to them, and they're like shocked. They're like, oh my god, he is the fastest sprinter in the town. Like it feels so. I don't know. I don't know what the word is. It's like it's childish, and it feels kind of like it's purposely eccentric.
To be fair, I think it's the same King Whiplash we were talking about a bit in Pet Sematary. It's just it's so extreme, both whether it's coming from the material or whether it's coming from as a work of adaptation. There's something so strange about the way that those guys behave and the way that it does connect to the flashbacks. The way they behave makes more sense in that milieu. It's when it gets brought into what is meant to be, I think, a pretty like dark kind of science fiction thriller in a lot of ways that the tone doesn't quite hit for me, and I think the same way. The bizarreness of it, the confusion of it was something that definitely I found more of a derailment to the film, even while I will admit to being consistently engrossed and being like, where the fuck could they possibly be going with the fact? Well, I mean, like the fact that one of the first thing that happens is they find this guy who is lost in the woods. They bring him in. He's clearly sick. His belly expands over the few hours that he hangs out with them. King loves his sort of fat guy stuff. That's another Kingism we'll bring up. He loves that kind of like the one kid who gets to be just like you get the guy who eats himself to this. You get the guy who's sick to his stomach and gurgling and farting, and in this case. Well, I'm trying to remember which two characters are handling that situation. It is
it's Damian Lewis, Jonesy, and Beaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because then it's Pete and Henry are the ones ripping around in sort of the backwoods, right? Like they're the ones who. Yeah, they do the barrel roll in the car, trying to swerve out of the way of the other woman who's sort of infected, because they're getting the early, without knowing it, they're getting the early details of the fact that there is some sort of infectious alien specimen making its way, kind of War of the Worlds style, I guess, that you could argue. Like the way that it kind of splotches on their skin, it kind of reminded me of sort of the plant element of that. And they're getting the details of what is going to be a sort of quarantine or like containment thriller that they just happen to have kind of wandered into completely by accident, just by virtue of where they decided to have their sort of weekend hunting getaway. And they are introduced to it via, the phallic worm shit monster making its way out of the toilet in a series of bizarre details that I honestly had to play back to feel like if I saw them correctly, because they try to flush it and flushing it doesn't work. And then for some reason, and maybe one of you two picked up on this, Jason Lee goes to grab toothpicks. Right? Yeah. And I'm not totally sure, like, was something stuck in his teeth, or he really needed toothpicks. I'm not sure why he needed toothpicks in that moment, but he drops the toothpicks, and it's a huge slow motion ordeal of every toothpick falling onto the floor, and the floor is covered in shit and blood from the guy who shit an alien. And you're like, oh no, I dropped all the toothpicks. And there's one clean one that he can reach for. And he reaches for it, but it's so far, his ass goes off the toilet seat and the creature gets out. And I was sitting there going, why did any of that happen?
Yeah, like just... Yeah, that I was.
What was the thinking? And I mean, I don't know. I guess you could argue what was the thinking behind decisions made in Pet Sematary, but I don't know. This was one of those moments where I went.
But there's like an emotional.
It's so epically directed, and I was like, I don't understand why he needs to lean over and grab that toothpick. But I don't know. Maybe they were like, we need a reason for him to get off the seat so that the monster gets out and it bites his fingers off and it bites a toilet bowl brush and it explodes into CG dust and starts possessing people.
And again, this tonally is strange. Like you'd think that there'd be more, or at least visual concern of like what's going on. And they're, obviously they don't want the thing to get out. They know it's going to be violence or some type of infection or something strange. But it feels like just with the jokes and the way that they're still directing it within the dark lighting as like, the toilet seat is kind of like moving up and down and he's just like doing his Jason Lee thing. It feels so... It does. It just feels strange. And then it turns into a more... This is when the reveal happens of like the bigger aliens, because I think Jason Lee gets killed by the slug.
Moment that makes more sense by the time you get to the end of the film, but when it first happens, you're just like, wait, you're like, wait, the worms are gray aliens, or there's another gray alien and the worms are fucking with them too. And it turns out it is two warring aliens, but you don't know that the first time that you just see one of the sort of gray aliens, like straight from, what was that Christopher Walken movie we covered a few years ago with Esther? Communion.
Yeah.
Like straight up classic gray alien.
Yeah. It's just like, this one is like bigger, so it feels as if it's like 9 feet tall kind of thing, and it's a little bit
like Bigfoot sized gray alien.
But it still has that kind of gray alien effect. And this is when, again, I didn't even read the synopsis to this, so I had no idea what this movie was going in. So when the alien appeared, I was like, "There's an alien in this," and like,
what?
It just everything started to like. I will say, I became immediately intrigued because I was just so shocked by the tone, the fact that an alien is now being introduced, and it looks like a classic gray alien. So I'm like, this feels very just almost classic sci-fi, but it's so uncanny and strange that it doesn't at the same time. So it's just
because it possesses Damian Lewis, and it turns into this thing where he becomes like sort of weird and maniacal, and he takes on this sort of split personality. He retreats into his mind palace because he's possessed by Mr. Gray,
who's a British
I couldn't figure out if he was
an alien, I guess a British alien
who is a British alien who says governor a lot.
Yeah, who, by the way,
Mike, we will actually need your help with this, please. Okay. Please, if there's any explanation in the book for why he talks with a British accent and says governor a bunch.
He doesn't speak in British accent. No.
So they made that conscious decision.
Wow. I feel like the novel is already so... I mean, I guess one thing that I think I'm probably in the minority on is I really like excessive King. Like I like when he gets digressive and weird and psychedelic. Like I love the Tommy Knockers. I love it. This novel has some of that magic. It's less to the level of those novels, but the weird thing they do with the film is like, I don't know, like they almost don't know how to handle the tonal berserk quality. I don't know how to explain.
But maybe they do if they're like, we're gonna add an even weirder element. He's British.
Yeah, I now knowing that that's not in the book, because when he started doing I'm like, this is so strange that it has to be a detail in the book. And the fact that
I felt really bad for Damian Lewis because I went, this is such a difficult thing to ask a performer to do
and be like mysterious and intimidating.
It was sorry, what?
I think it was his choice.
Yeah,
I think Damian Lewis.
Also, I feel less bad for Damian Lewis all of a sudden.
For our audience here, they also do a thing where he's still in his mind palace, but before he like completely transitions into it, he talks to himself, and they do the Smeagol thing, like from Lord of the Rings, where he is talking to himself in the same setting, but they just do a reverse shot of himself doing the different voices, and he's doing it while he's riding a snowmobile. And I will say, when this started,
ambitious.
I was laughing so hard, and I was having such a great time, but in this way that I knew. Or you know what? I still don't even know. I was unsure of if it was like intentional, and that's most of this movie. I really don't know what was like intentionally humorous, because some of it is obviously supposed to be. But then there's moments where I'm like, this feels like there should be more tension in it, and there should be like I should feel more like it's crawling under my skin. But yet I just feel strange instead. I feel like there's this like halfway mark between parody and true science fiction horror. And yeah, it's I don't know. I haven't seen anything like this, really. It feels like at least
it's
this
one of
kind
those
of tone.
It's some of those things where I feel like if this was made at a lower budget, part of me thinks that I would be like, oh, this is meant to be deliberately uncanny. But because they had so much money and resources to put this, and I know
made.
that and I went, this is clearly the take that they wanted. This is clearly, you know, like, and I don't know, there was something that made it even harder to kind of figure out what exactly it was that they were going for. But at the same time, I was fascinated. Every decision being made, I was like, Timothy Oliphant going crazy in front of the bonfires, ranting about clams or something, and then having his penis like chomped on by the worm while peeing into the snow, and then like humping a bonfire to like try to get it off. I was like, they think this is funny.
Yeah, they have to, right? And then what's strange too is, again, it kind of goes into the King stuff where he is talking to himself, but he's doing it in this way that feels so like it's a monologue, or like it's like he's saying things about the past that we don't quite know. He's literally giving exposition at a certain point to that dead woman body, and there's also a moment right before that with Oliphant where they discovered the woman that's like halfway stuck in the road and she's like being frozen to death or whatever, and as she's doing that, like, this is a woman that's either dying or dead, and he goes like,
she's supposed to be similarly infected the way that the guy who shit out the alien was, but she's just kind of
And he goes, Miss Roadkill, you almost got us dead back there. You better say something. And it's just in this like moment of very serious. It's like, you just crashed, you almost died. Although they seem to like heal really quickly, that they kind of brush over. But regardless, and then this woman is being frozen
they
to
also
death,
have the ability to
so
like
strange.
locate direction, sort of like Donnie Darko style, with like those like fate like liquid streams, which was something I don't know that I completely understood. But it's something the alien wants the power to do, or Mr. Grey does.
Yeah. And I did like the introduction to that. I like when Oliphant uses that power with to get that girl's keys, to get her number. And what they do in the intro is he just uses this little finger thing that you see later with the actual effect. And what he does is he turns to her and he just goes like, this is going to be a little weird, but just go with it. Trust me, it works. And then he does the finger thing. And then later they show you what that is. So I kind of liked that setup. And what payoff, if you want to use that strong of a word. But Oliphant's character is very strange, where he's like constantly talking and
they all are, man.
Yeah, well, true. But
they all are. I actually think Damian Lewis, if you remove the British part, is maybe the most normal character in the movie.
Yeah. But they had to give him the alternate British personality.
Well, yeah, because he spends a good part of the movie as like the almost sort of like, I don't know, the sort of Terminator figure, the sort of the guy of on his own mission, kind of hunting them down a little bit, but clearly on some sort of mission to do with the aliens that we don't completely understand. While Thomas Jane, I think, gets separated a bit as the guy who gets to kind of go into the more sort of action movie component of it, because he's the one who gets into the barrel roll with the car. He's the one who first gets the rifle and actually comes back and finds Jason Lee's just absolutely gruesomely mutilated body, and the parasite sort of laying the sort of like larva, sort of eggs all over the bed. And he's the one who gets the sequence where he's actually, shooting the worms and lighting the bed on fire and getting into the more sort of body horror kind of component of the movie, which is how they introduce the idea of maybe the most insane inclusion of the entire movie, which is the expansion into military movie with the
Morgan Freeman and Tom Sizemore, baby.
Which is the craziest casting decisions. The man in charge of what is essentially an elite alien hunting force is a man named Colonel Abraham Curtis, played by Morgan Freeman, with the bushiest eyebrows you've ever seen a makeup department put on an actor. His second in command is a man named Owen, played by Tom Sizemore, obviously 90s acting legend, and spread spreading the quote-unquote Ripley infection is what they're calling it, after Alien, is the thing that they are the most concerned about containing. And they have a lot of sort of military jargon language about like calling each other buccos and basically talking about the fact that they run what's called the Blue Unit, and it's a sort of cutthroat special ops crew that is, you know, going to contain this alien force at all costs, because it's sort of implied that I guess the Morgan Freeman character has been hunting these aliens or studying them for what sounds like decades, and he's been the reason they haven't taken over the Earth, and he's going to sort of maintain that. And he's going to do it through extreme fascist force, including, you know, ripping around in Blackhawks to fire at giant UFOs and armies of gray aliens that are literally begging for mercy through telepathy, and like legitimately showing you like show-stopping action sequences, hugely vividly realized with expensive CG effects work, that he is genociding the gray aliens, who might not even be the aliens who are committing all of this. It's the worm aliens, but he doesn't distinguish because they're both aliens. And he's taking his mission as far as not only killing aliens, he's also going to contain and kill as many infected humans as he can. And I just have to say, the way that he talks about doing that, when he goes, you know, look, Tom, I'm going to possibly, you know, we don't know how many of these people are going to get infected and they're going to be infectious for the rest of their life. So we are going to massacre every person here. And whether they drive Chevrolets or they shop at Walmart or they never miss an episode of Friends, you know, it's something that I've thought about. These are Americans and I am willing to slaughter them. And just the way that Morgan Freeman delivers lines like these, sort of straight-faced, but sort of you have to wonder a little bit if he reads a line like, I'm that dog, missiling aliens. And you're like,
monster,
holy...
baby. Yeah. It's so funny. Well, that was another scene where for me, it did another flip kind of thing. Because like, it's one thing to do, you know, you introduce the aliens and you know that there's multiple of them and they have all these slugs and stuff. That's one thing. But then when they show how big the crashed spaceship is and they have the helicopters doing the basically Independence Day sequence, I was like, I can't believe that this is where this film has gotten to at this point.
But also Morgan Freeman's like a quasi like Kilgore in Apocalypse Now, like kind of figure a little bit too, right? Like it's so...
Yeah. And then they're doing... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if they kept his name because in the novel he refers to himself as Colonel Kurtz, like he's Kurtz in the novel.
He actually does. No, in this they call him Curtis, which is maybe them sort of referencing that.
I wonder if
they thought it was
in the
nose.
novel it is Curtis and he says Kurtz as a reference, like the character itself.
If I recall correctly, I think it is. Yeah, and they're obsessed with the song "Sympathy for the Devil" in the novel too. They're constantly blasting "Sympathy for the Devil" while they're wiping out aliens and and you know what, the thing too with like we were talking about these tonal changes, I think doesn't necessarily help. It keeps you kind of engaged with all the things that are going on, but each kind of section, whether or not you're going like from Morgan Freeman, Tom Sizemore, or Thomas Jane and Timothy Oliphant, at least for a certain time period, and Jason Lee and Damian Lewis, there's always like something different with each duo that you're kind of focused on. Like Morgan Freeman and Tom Sizemore obviously have this like Independence Day science fiction action thing. Damian Lewis is going through this like psychosis thing where he's battling himself and an alien in the same body. You know, Thomas Jane, like you were saying, Josh, has more of the body horror element where he's taking on the slugs and everything. It just kind of keeps going back to all of these things over and over again and trying to make them connect at a certain point. I'm not sure how successful that is, but it is.
And Mike, you are correct, by the way. He is called Abraham Kurtz with a Z in the book. So maybe they felt that King was a little too on the nose with his reference, and maybe they thought in book form it's a fine reference, but bringing it back into movie form, it's going to just make people think about Apocalypse Now, even though it was a direct inspiration.
Yes.
They also do some weird things with Damian Lewis's alien character, where obviously he has the accent, which we've talked about, but sometimes and it's most of the time. I think I counted only one time they don't do it, which actually confused me. But he's got a hood just on his jacket, and when he puts on the hood as the alien, it does this like specific and repetitive every time he does it sound effect. And I was like, is there a significance to that? It never adds up to anything, but they do it.
I don't even know if I picked up on that.
Yeah, they do it every time except for one time. And I made it in my notes because I was like, oh, it didn't do it that time. Why didn't it do it that time? Because I thought it was going to lead to something, and it doesn't. But I found that to just be a strange decision, I guess. Overall.
It is. No, I had a similar reaction to the fact that Blue Bayou does not come into the finale. I was actually vividly like, I was like kind of shaking.
I was mad.
I was mad about it. I was sitting there going, you set up every childhood detail multiple times. The Scooby-Doo box, I guess they sort of set up the Massachusetts thing with the Red Sox stuff, but like there were a couple different elements that they really set up through the whole thing. The Mr. Gray thing, they have it said like multiple times, including in the flashback at one point.
The Mighty Mouse thing, the here it comes to save the day, that whole thing.
Yep. Yeah. Like everything gets brought up. Blue Bayou is referenced, I kid you not, at least 3 times in the first half of the movie, where they sing it in the flashback. It comes up in the records room that he remembers the lyrics. They're in the back of his mind. And I was like, how are they not singing Blue Bayou to the alien at the end of this movie? I don't know if it would have made it a better movie, but I was like following the logic of your own movie. Blue Bayou needs to make an appearance here because everything else does, and I'm so excited to get to this section of the movie because again the Morgan Freeman stuff is it feels like a strange detour that you go on, that you feel like you're kind of hallucinating while you're watching it, because it's just him literally massacring massive amounts of aliens with extremely violent force. And it builds to the obvious storytelling device they're going to use here of that Tom Sizemore is going to have a sort of crisis of conscience about the fact that I feel like I'm just genociding aliens, and it kind of feels weird. And now he's threatening to also do it to like Americans, and that's really upsetting to me. It's a really dark subject, obviously, that comes up in the movie here. And then they have Henry get captured and brought to the containment site, which is where the two sides kind of end up meeting each other. It's the Thomas Jane character, and that's where they set up the Boston thing too. They were like, I'm a doctor from Boston. It's like Beantown, great city, And I was like, okay, the Red Sox are coming into this. And he essentially figures out what it is that the Morgan Freeman, Tom Sizemore characters are thinking of doing because of the telepathic power. And he kind of uses it to sort of gnaw at the guilty conscience of the Sizemore character. He references his wife and kid. He quotes his sort of dead soldier dad. He has a quote like, sometimes we have to kill, but the real job is to save lives. And he brings that up to him to be, we are going to stop, as he puts it, shit from hitting the planetary fan. Because again, this is the dialogue. Like this is almost. There were times where I was like, they are not serious. This is not.
I know it can't. They
are
be.
joking.
It's like it cannot be serious. I'm supposed to take this at least with some camp. It's just that the direction and the color tone of everything feels like it should be hyper serious. And
well, they're genociding aliens, and it's upsetting. And then they go over to this, and one of the ones that hugely got me was early, and it's sort of meant to be a darker scene, I think, where Morgan Freeman interrogates one of the other soldiers who he feels is being too kind or too lenient in his line of work towards humans who possibly could be infected. He lets one go, despite the fact that he didn't really test them, and he goes, you basically implies he just should have shot them in the head, because that's the only method that he believes in terms of is again violent military force. But the line he uses was that you crossed the Curtis line by lying to me. And it's just a weird self-referential thing where he's basically just like, I have a line and you crossed it, and if you want to be in my unit, you can't cross that line. Well, there's a part where Tom Sizemore breaks Henry out because they're going to go handle the alien, Mr. Gray alien themselves, instead of using the Morgan Freeman character. And he literally watches them drive away, and he goes, you just drove over the Curtis line.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a one-liner you'd give to an 80s action star or something. And I was like, like, what was King? Well, I don't know. I don't know if this was lines that, again, they wrote or King wrote, because I didn't read the material, but this was like the tonal whiplash from this stuff was something that was definitely, every time I felt like it was getting darker or more serious, it would pull back and do something like that.
And it was, I was having a hard time, because again, I haven't read the book. So I was wondering if sometimes the writer was trying to be more kingly, you know, and throw in those kind of eccentric stuff that he throws in with dialogue every once in a while, and some works.
But I don't know. He's also meant to be a Kilgore style character, so maybe he is meant to be like a cartoon of what fascism is, or a military general is supposed to be, right? So, and
I think again it relates to the tone of the direction, where it's like you can never tell. You're not quite sure. You're like, I feel like it's the perfect, not perfect, but like this strange melding of seriousness and camp to a point where I find it completely indiscernible. Yeah. Like I don't know.
It's Stephen King high out of his mind, putting pen to paper, quite literally.
This is just painkillers. That's all this is.
Painkillers sound crazy. Cinema, I gotta guess some apparently, because this is crazy. But it does build to this finale, and I do want to get Mike's thoughts on this because I know that this part is different. But for anyone who hasn't seen it, the finale to this movie is truly deranged, I think. And
it's wild.
Essentially, to summarize, we've got three parties here. We've got Damian Lewis. He's the possessed British psycho, Mr. Grey. He's at this point in the film bringing an infected dog who has worms in its system to the water supply, because his ultimate plan, kind of teased throughout the film, is that he's going to drop a worm into the water supply, and Boston is going to become a bunch of worm-like shitting aliens. So that's his plan. Not good. Characters are trying to stop that. You've got Morgan Freeman, fascist Terminator, military general, flying the chopper in. That's how he's going to stop it. He's going to missile it. He's going to machine gun it. It's the only way he knows. You've got Thomas Jane's doctor and Tom Sizemore, who are uniting around, we're going to stop this, but we're not going to kill a bunch of humans to do it. That's really they're just not psycho military men. And a last minute addition of Donnie Wahlberg as the grown up Duddits who finally makes an appearance here. He's suffering from leukemia, which is why I guess he's not invited to the group hangout, because I was kind of wondering if he's alive, why he's not invited to the group hangout.
He gave you the powers, yo.
They talk a lot about him. He's living with his mom. They grab him, grab his Scooby-Doo lunchbox, grab his Red Sox hat and jacket, and they be like, he's going to be a good boy. He's going to go out there. He's going to save the world, little Duddy, and he's going to stop Mr. Grey from putting one of the worms into the Boston water supply. So these are all the figures that you've got.
Yeah. Do you think that Wahlberg did the best he could with the material he was given as an actor? Because I think he did the most subtle thing he possibly could, honestly.
Yeah,
given what I bet King wrote this character as too.
It's always hard when you have someone who's writing a character to be obviously extremely mentally handicapped, right, and you have a writer who maybe doesn't handle that in the most tasteful degree as a writer in general. I mean, he is someone who very frequently did an autistic character is kind of like having superpowers, something that occurs a number of times in King's material. Here's an example of, again, I feel like it being generous. I feel like the idea is meant to be the more innocent and pure you are.
I think it's back meant to be Ellie thing.
Yeah,
from Pet Sematary.
It's kind of back to that. I don't know. Some people might be offended by the fact that you think that, you're attributing that to obviously, someone who has a mental handicap here in this case. But Donnie Wahlberg shows up and is doing he's being more tasteful. He's doing the best he can. It's not quite Simple Jack, but it's not quite not that. So it's somewhere in the middle. He's involved in this set piece. Before he gets involved, the two military guys are shooting at each other. Tom Sizemore and Morgan Freeman have to wrap their story up first. They literally do the sequence in Rambo 3 where he shoots down a helicopter at each other.
Yeah.
Which is kind of insane. And then Thomas Jane and Wahlberg, they're the childhood friends who roll up into the sort of wintry water supply kind of area with a submachine gun and the Scooby-Doo lunchbox. They have what I think is meant to be sort of the emotional climax about whether Thomas Jane is willing to shoot Damian Lewis or not, because he can't tell whether this is his friend or whether this is an alien possessing his friend's body.
Right.
It's got a little bit of that sort of The Thing sort of style paranoia on, you know, when those two guys kind of reach the end and they're like, who do we know who each other are? Like, what's kind of happening here? And that is resolved by essentially Donnie Wahlberg as Duddits knowing the difference. And he comes in and he goes, that's Mr. Gray in there. That is not Jonesy. I think because the implication is he's also an alien who was sent to the Friends or something. I couldn't quite figure out what exactly the backstory was supposed to be here, but he comes in and Donnie Wahlberg, bless his heart, he walks in, he gets a super dramatic close-up, and he goes, in the exact voice you're going to imagine, he goes, hello, Mr. Gay, because he can't say Gray. He calls him Mr. Gay, and he says, go away. And then he says, ooby wooby doo, we got some work to do now.
Yeah, and then drops his Scooby-Doo lunchbox and proceeds to take out
he
that
summons,
alien.
essentially, he challenges the alien to leave his friend's body, and then he lets the alien worm eat him. It looks like it sort of impales his stomach, but then he's kind of winning the fight as he gets swallowed into him.
Right.
And then he explodes. And you just go, oh, so I guess, you know, all it took was sort of the mentally challenged character to say, hello, Mr. Gay, do the Scooby-Doo theme, get eaten.
Yeah, I guess it was like...
And then the alien exploded. And I kind of was like, I literally don't know what happened or what's happening.
It's like, I guess it's like, I think what it says here, the only reason I'm saying it now is because it's in the wiki and it like tries its best to explain it. And it says like it infects Duddits with an overdose and then it badly mutates him. So I guess it's like that mutation gave him the strength to actually take it's almost like an irony for the alien in a way. Like it's like mutating him into this monster and now it's taken him over, kind of thing. And then when it explodes, they do that final shot too, where, you know, there's like one singular small slug and then the real Jonesy stomps on it and smiles at Thomas. And that's the end. And I was like, that was bizarre too.
Cuts to credits on them all just sitting around having a good time at the cabin. And I was like, most of them died.
Yeah. It doesn't
pretty
seem
horribly.
Yeah.
And all it took was like the mentally handicapped kid that you saved to like sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
I was like, it's such a weird
I guess what they're
arc.
saying
And so
is
Mike,
like,
please explain. Please use your knowledge of the book. What happened here? Please.
I mean, I feel like I'm not going to be able to redeem it based on the novel. So, I mean, but I felt like the implication in the movie was that Duddits was an alien, which is not the case in the novel. Like in the novel, he's basically he's supposed to be someone with the equivalent of like what Danny Torrance has. Like he has the Shining, basically. He has the ability. Right. So he has a certain kind of sensitivity. He has a kind of like almost a clairvoyance, or not clairvoyance. He has a certain kind of extrasensory perception, I guess. So he's able to kind of navigate into Jonesy's mind to excise Mr. Gray, and he does die in the novel as well. But again, on the page, something about like the kind of braiding of consciousness is like, for me as a reader, and I think I'm even in the minority as a reader. I think a lot of I don't even think Stephen King likes the novel Dreamcatcher, but but something about like you can't do that sort of thing on screen, really. Like
it's hard. It's way more difficult.
Really
I see.
Yeah.
So you think that they were trying to physically, like, tangibly realize something that's clearly like a psychological experience for the character?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe that is because, like, since he's the only one that physically transforms out of all of the other ones that just get like eaten or whatever it is, that might be their way of doing it, where it's kind of like, you know, he had this power to go into the mind, so he actually physically mutates and then connects with the alien and then explodes it or whatever. That kind of makes sense, just given the connection of the book. It's just harder to read, I guess, as a scene.
This finale is exactly why people aren't faithful to King when it comes time to do something like this, in both good ways and bad ways. But, like, you know, there's a reason when the guys who decided they were going to do the It movie, they were like, okay, how do we get around the giant space turtle?
Yeah, or it's like, let's not include the orgy. How about that too, you know?
Yeah, that was, you know, like, and it's stuff when I read that book, like, it's one of my all-time favorite books. Like, I love that book, and I love the surrealness of how it goes to those places, but it's something that's really difficult to realize on on the screen. So I could see them being like, this is how we are trying to do it. But yeah, it does, making this a medium. Physical experience without explaining it or without setting it up does make it just feel like you're watching a worm swallow a mentally handicapped child, and then the worm goes, oh, this tastes gross or something, and exploding. Like that's how it plays on the screen, even though that's not what's happening. Like clearly, like it feels like it might be
a thing like connecting to the flashback, even though it wasn't a direct. Well, like, you know, you could argue, I guess they saved his life. Who knows what those bullies were doing? They were being incredibly cruel. So
well, they do set up that like Mr. Gray appeared in their childhood and like kidnapped a child as well, which was like a detail I didn't
actually.
So like that's a detail they include in the movie that I was like, I did not know how to make sense of it. I was like, so an alien was here earlier fucking with them, and he was talking about the alien earlier? Or?
Well, it is set in the same town as Derry, Maine. It's like the fictional town that is set. So it could be like another manifestation of that same being, maybe, because
maybe it is the space turtle.
I think it might.
I'd go with that because I like that.
These are the one guys who had the bravery to go that far.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but isn't the John Seal photography like kind of striking? Like it's very well shot.
Oh yeah,
I also kind of like the music by James Newton Howard as well. Like that's just it. This is like an expensively realized movie by people who know how to make movies, and like that's what's
strange. It's like I've never seen something.
That is exactly what's weird about it.
Yeah, I've never seen a movie do well. I'm sure I have, but there's so few of them that have this kind of like where they capture this kind of strange feeling that it's like they have all of these different ideas that eventually at least come together in the sense that they completed the movie. But there's so many whiplashes that it feels indiscernible at times. Like I really don't know whether I'm watching a horror, or a sci-fi, or a comedy, or it's like. It's so bizarre that way. And that to me is intriguing, and I'm very fascinated by it, but I just don't know if it like worked overall.
I'm slowly convincing myself that I liked this movie.
I know. It's like me too. See, when I watched it, man, I think what happened is I started to kind of check out a little bit, because the one thing is that this movie is still 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I think that some of its ideas are a little bit stretched out. And then maybe some of the like whiplash effects were weighing on me more just because of that. But I don't know. As we talk about it too, I'm like, it's so fascinatingly bizarre. So I'm like, 9 times out of 10, I would probably something like this. But when I went to my rating,
it's the pure author's brain in such a ridiculous state on the screen, made by people who, for some reason, were like, we are going to treat this seriously and faithfully. And with a lot of resources, and it's so like that is, I think, what ultimately kind of hits about the movie in a way that I don't know. I really did. Like I was so baffled by this in the moment watching it and talking about it. I'm realizing I kind of have affection for the strangeness and the boldness of it. Yeah, like I honestly do.
My brother came out while I was watching it, and he saw like kind of the infection part or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, this is like the thing," and I was like, "Yeah, there's an element of the thing." It's like there's a lot of other things moving.
That's
here,
one ingredient of 1,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing that this felt the most like to me by the end of it is it reminded me of watching those weird episodes of the X-Files when they go off the rails. They used to have those episodes sometimes where it felt like they were like, oh, how can the show recover from this monster of the week kind of moment? And that's kind of the only other thing that's given me the vibe of this particular movie that somehow costs like $70 million, is like over 2 hours long, has a million wipe transitions in it, because I guess Kasdan just comes from like the era where that was
Star Wars, baby,
the thing. I mean, we were just talking about Akira Kurosawa the other week, so it just reminded me so much of that.
I like a good wipe.
I still don't know, even by the end of the movie, how Dreamcatchers are related to anything that happens in any part of the movie.
I love this too. The tagline or whatever is like, 4 friends hung a Dreamcatcher in their cabin. It's about to catch something it cannot stop. I'm like, what? Like, I don't think that had any element at all.
That doesn't even help clarify.
The only thing that the imagery pops up again with the Dreamcatcher is when the alien spaceship explodes. there's kind of like those patterns within it, but that's it. And it's kind of like symbolic, I guess, but it doesn't really go into any explanation. It could be like the fact that dream catchers are like, it's got that paranormal aspect where it's like it saves you from nightmares, and they have this, they have this connection through their telepathy that it could all in some way symbolically connect that way, but it is loose.
You just reminded me of the aliens suicide bombing the Blackhawks too in that moment. They're just like self-destruct. A real image that happens in this movie.
They just go kamikaze mode.
Oh my God.
What a movie.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so
what a movie. If we're pivoting
weird
towards reductive rating around shit, I think I'm gonna give this a 3, man.
Oh man, I already logged it as
I
a 2,
rated it, and I kind of
like,
gave it I gave it a 2, but I gave it the 2 in the heart, which is the rarest rating I think I've ever given. It's only the second or third time that rating has ever existed for me, because there was so much strangeness
confusion
and stuff that I liked about it. But I have kind of convinced myself that this is one of the weirdest Hollywood objects we've ever talked about, and part of the weirdness is that it is pure King auteurism whacked out of his mind, made with resources far beyond what anyone should have made it with, and far more faithfully than it should have been made. And it is a completely singular and unique thing for all of those reasons. I don't even really need to get into all the specific details again that we've already gone through, but that is the long and short of it for me, is that I really do think this is one of the most ill-conceived and mesmerizing movies in equal measure watching it in real time. And I think, divorced from the actual experience of watching it in real time and thinking about it, I have a lot of respect for that, or at the very least I can say that it held my attention. I was not bored for a second watching this movie. And which is kind of, I mean, I guess you could say maybe it's hard to be, because it's doing so many different things and whiplashing between so many different tones. It's keeping you on your toes by doing that. But again, doing a Stand By Me, It style sort of telepathic childhood friends, and also doing a War of the Worlds, Body Snatchers, body horror, The Thing, B-movie, and collapsing those things together in ways that was just completely unthinkable and completely delirious. I kind of have to respect the boldness of it. I kind of have to respect that it exists a little bit. And I do think I will be coming back to this and being trying to extract more from it. And it kind of made me want to read the book. So I don't know. I don't know what to say to that, other than I think I liked that movie. So it's going to land in the 3 territory for me.
I'm still having a bit of a hard time, but like the conversation, I definitely say, like, makes me think I want to go back to this and watch it knowing exactly what it is, and seeing if those certain tonal switches work a little bit better. It was just so strange to sit with this movie, and then it's presented in a certain way through like the color scheme and through the directing style, and then it becomes what it becomes, and it keeps changing like throughout the entire film, that I just felt such a whiplash effect and such a that kind of feeling I get where I'm like, how much is this intentional, and then how much does that actually matter in art sometimes? And it's just I like this is truly one that has been just pulling me apart a little bit. Like I was watching the Damian Lewis performance, and he's starting to do like the British thing, and again my brother came out, was just wondering what I was watching. And I was just like, dude,
did he get to see one of the governors?
Okay, that's what. Yeah, so I was like, dude, you got to watch Damian Lewis, because he's doing like a Smeagol thing where he's going back and forth between his American and this really bizarre British accent. And he watched it, and I think he laughed for like 10 solid minutes when he started doing it, to the point where I was almost like, I didn't even think it was that funny, but I think he was watching it completely out of context. And again, given the kind of direction that the film looks like and everything, that he just found like the uncanniness just hit him in such a way that was like completely hilarious. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm just spinning wheels at this point, but it's a bizarre film. It's something that I'm very intrigued by. I think I will go back to it. I have to say I'm having a little bit of a hard time whether it's the 2 or the 3, but it's I would honestly recommend this to everyone, just to see something like this because it's so unique.
I mean, if you want to see pure unfiltered King, faithfully realized on the screen
for 75 mil or 70 mil or whatever it is, it's kind of insane. So yeah, I don't know what to say other than that at this point, but go watch it.
Yeah. For you, Mike.
I mean, I think I'm one of the only people in the world who has this strange affection, especially for the novel, which is a lot better than the film, I think. Although even Stephen King has said it's one of the few books of his that he just like really doesn't like now. I think he sees the drugs in it and he sees the delirium in it and the like physical pain too. But yeah, there is something really fascinating about this glossy, sleek, really serious adaptation of an unadaptable, psychedelic, whacked out, Josh, I think that's the right word, novel. Like it's just such a fascinating movie that I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but it's a 4 for me.
Hell yeah. I love that. Honestly, I think it's just something I got to retackle. That's all it is. I just had the expectations I had for it were definitely not what was presented to me in any way. And
it's cracked.
It turning into Independence Day at a certain point was just fucking insane to me. I couldn't believe what I was watching. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's going to, I think, wrap it up for Dreamcatcher and for this week's episode. That was once again Pet Sematary from 1989 and Dreamcatcher from 2003. Mike, thank you so much for coming back and for sharing your personal experience with Stephen King, with maybe a double feature no one else probably would have brought. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
If there's anything while you're here that you want maybe some of our listeners to go check out of yours, any of your writing or your books or your podcast, what do you got going on? Tell us about it.
So I have a writing themed podcast called Craftwork that I co-host with my fiance. We have long conversations with other writers about process, craft, technique. So that's available on the podcast platforms. And yeah, my books are available where you get books. So my website's mikethornwrites.com. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me, guys. It was super fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Man.
And bringing on, I mean, Pet Sematary I love, but bringing on Dreamcatcher, just incredible. Incredible stuff. Love that you did
It's exactly the kind of movie we rely on guests to show us and be like,
exactly.
you should put this on your list. And I got to be honest, it's one of the few times Jamie and I have ever had a brain breaking
it melted me. Like I love when that happens. So
moment like that. So yeah, it's definitely one of the stranger ones that we've talked about. But in 1 week's time, we are going to be continuing. I think this was a perfect kickoff to our spooky season in the Spooktober season. Obviously, the rest of October, we're going to be talking about nothing but spooky movies all month. And next week, as Jamie already alluded to, we have our annual Italian horror episode that we always try to fit in if we can. It's the 50th anniversary of Argento's Deep Red this year. So we are going to be talking about Deep Red, finally, one of the big ones we haven't talked about yet. And it was also a good excuse because there's sort of a psychic component to it to also talk about Lucio Fulci's The Psychic. So we're going to talk about two of our favorite Italians, Argento and Fulci, two ones that neither of us have actually I've seen. Jamie, have you seen Deep Red?
No, I almost watched it 1,000 times and just never got around to it.
Yeah, because I don't think either of us have done The Psychic, but I've seen Deep Red. I was about to say both of us have neither seen it. I was like, no, Deep Red's a fantastic movie. So I am excited to talk about that, but that's what you guys can expect over on the Patreon next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back with a special guest, and I'm going to look up how to say this because I kind of have to sound this one out a little bit. Anthrophagus. Okay. I don't know if is that a word? I don't even know if that is. I don't even know if I spelled that right. Yeah, or maybe it's anthropophagus or something like that. I know that the gore effects are like kind of Jimmy, you've probably seen the poster for it, or it's Antrophagus. That's why I'm saying it wrong, not anthro. It's a 1980 Italian, I think it's Italian horror by Joe D'Amato, and the poster of it is a guy literally eating his own intestines.
Let's go.
So that I'm excited to talk about with a guest, and it's by the guy who did the makeup effects for Stage Fright and Castle Freak. And also The Skin. Oh my god, the Liliana Cavini movie.
It's kind of got that that style of poster that reminds you of like Cannibal Holocaust or something like that. So
yeah, and it's from 1980, so it looks crazy. And the pairing is a 1982 movie called The Slayer, directed by J.S. Cardone. And we have not seen either of these movies, but we trust our guest, who is a regular spooky season appearer, who is once again making his way back. So we are excited to do that in 2 weeks' time. And I think that is and then we're going to do a Halloween episode as well, obviously, where we are going to be finally going Frankenstein mode. So look forward to that as well. I think I'm still trying to figure out what the pairing is, but I'm thinking about doing The Curse of Frankenstein, because I kind of want to talk about Hammer horror too. It's been a little while since we've done Hammer horror, and I like that one.
Yeah.
So that might be what we do as our Halloween episode, but that's what you can expect over the rest of October. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy and keep it spooky.
Yeah, keep it sleazy, keep it spooky, everybody.